My name is Rich Mucci. I'm chair of the Winchester Select Board. Welcome to your Wednesday, December 7th, 2022 Winchester Select Board meeting. I'm joined this evening by Vice Chair Anthea Brady, members Mariellen Guluboff, John Fallon, and Michael Betancourt. We have our friends from Paradigm here as well, John and Ray. We are here on a special night. This is going to be the interview night for our town manager position. We have 3 interviews tonight, starting with Chris Senior in a couple minutes. I did just want to go through a couple things for the public. There'll be no public comment tonight at our select board meeting. What I encourage the public to do is over the next couple of days, we have a meeting scheduled for next Monday, December 12th. If you want to submit written comment, our email addresses are on the website, the town website. In addition, on the 12th, we will allow public comment. We'll start the evening with public comment, so 2 opportunities to give feedback after you have a chance to digest these interviews tonight, and we certainly welcome the public's input. With that, I think we'll jump right in. John or Ray, do you have anything initially you want to say, or?
No, I think we're ready to go if the board is.
Okay, so the way this will work tonight is first I'm going to welcome our guest, Chris Senior. Chris is the town manager at Cohasset. Thank you very much for coming out this evening.
Thank you for having me here.
You're welcome. What we're going to do is John will ask some questions, Ray will ask some questions, some set questions, and then the members feel free to jump in with any follow-up questions at any time. We'll do that for approximately 40-45 minutes maybe, and then open it up to the board for questions. We have an hour with you tonight. If we go a little over, that's okay. Looking forward to a spirited dialogue, so members feel free to jump in at any point. With that, John or Ray, whoever's going to start, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Chris, congratulations. Thank you for being here this evening and being one of 3 finalists for the Winchester Town Manager position. You did get brief introductions of board members early on, but we're here to hear about you. And so, if you can introduce yourself to the board, why are you here? And talk about your past, your positions in municipal government, and what's the special interest to come here in Winchester.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, members of the board, for having me here tonight. And thank you to the screening committee. Had a great spirited interview with them, so I really appreciated that. Got to spend some time here Sunday wandering around. Beautiful, beautiful downtown. It was a beautiful day, too. Nice winter day. My name is Chris Senior. I'm a native New Yorker, but as it turns out, I have roots much closer to home here. My mom is a native of Stoneham, and I was actually baptized in the Stoneham Congregational Church, as my mom reminded me today. I didn't remember that moment, but and we used to come up periodically. My grandmother actually lived in Boston for many years after here, so I actually have ties right here. But I'm a native New Yorker, grew up on Long Island. I went to Boston University, where I was a major in journalism and economics. Went from there, did some journalism in the Metro West area, which was my first introduction to local government. Long Island's a very different structure. I did work in that later, but so I got my first experience to conservation commissions and town meetings and select boards. Little did I know that many years later I would actually be running a town on the south coast of Massachusetts. It was a great experience. I got to meet a lot of people, got to see the passion people had for local government. And they were very cooperative because covering a dozen towns like I did was hard, but people were very friendly, and learned a lot, and went to law school. Worked for local government for a while, and then went to Washington, worked for the home builders, got to travel the country, got to see planning, zoning, contracts, land development in lots of different ways, from Seattle to Cape Cod. It was actually a great experience. And then I got encouraged to come back to government in Nassau. There was a big change, worked in their planning board, very complicated structure. I won't get into why it works like that, but the county had subdivision power over chunks of the towns. Did that for a year, helped them kind of modernize, and then went to North Hempstead, where I had been earlier in my career, as the number 2 deputy town supervisor. The township was 220,000 people. There were 31 villages, a very complicated governmental structure. It was more like being in a county. And my boss, who got elected, said, hey, let's make things better and different. And we did. We spent 10 years doing some really creative government. 2 things that I'd highlight: Project Independence, which is an aging in place program, which started in 2 little census tracts, became so popular people started to move into those census tracts. So my boss, being a big thinker and a big, he's an elected leader, he's like, I want to make it town-wide. So we did. We scaled it, and it went town-wide. And our 3-in-1 system, we did a non-governmental, non-emergency call system, which Somerville has, Boston has, which we actually got the 311 number, and we used that. And then we tied that to a performance management system called TownStep, which not only won awards, but helped us track what we were doing. The town was 50 square miles, 220,000 people. There was a lot going on. So it helped manage the town. So it was a very exciting opportunity. I really enjoyed governmental leadership and management. I started learning that in Cub Scouts. My dad pushed me into that in 3rd grade. I ended up as an Eagle Scout, and then did a lot of work, with just leadership work as a patrol leader, and then in high school, and then in college, and in law school. And the opportunity, I said, I really like working in government. And an opportunity came, a couple of opportunities presented themselves, and Cohasset opened up, and there I was. And 9 years later, here I am. It's been a great time down there. And again, I'm not looking to leave it. The opportunity, you have very persuasive recruiters who said, give this town a real good look, Chris. And I did. You have a great community. There's a lot of exciting things going on. You have the challenges a lot of communities do. Good staff, and again, what's most important, a good volunteer base. If you don't have that, if the community is not engaged, local New England government doesn't work, unless you're in a big city. And even if you're in a big city, you need people engaging. All the committees, all the elected positions. Last week, or Thanksgiving week, we celebrated our 6th employee recognition night, and then we did our 2nd board and committee volunteer night. We recognized 200 plus volunteers in Cohasset that serve on boards and committees. And they make the place go. And it's important. It's been one of the best experiences that I've had in this role, is to work with so many people who care about their community and want to make it better. And I'm there to help that happen on a day-to-day basis, make sure the government runs, and then making sure the Conservation Commission has the right staff and the right assistants, and that the zoning planning group, everything's working with that, and the meetings are scheduled, and that the select board is supported all the time. That's the board I deal with most. And it's been a lot of fun. It really has. It's been, and again, you've seen my resume. I don't need to reiterate all of it. Done a lot of exciting things. And I think there's more to do down there at the same time. This was an opportunity. The more I looked into it, I thought it was a good fit. I'm a very big collaborative leader. Every community is different. I think from the people I talked to, including some who I did not realize grew up in Winchester, all roads pass through every town in New England, it seems. And they said, hey, give it a serious look, and I have. And again, I think the screening interview was great. And just walking around and things I've read and seen, have said, hey, I think this might be a good fit.
How much do you know about Winchester at this point? And what did you do to learn that, I guess?
Well, there's always a lot to learn when you're on the inside, right? I've seen the outside. It's a beautiful place. You've done some amazing infrastructure work. I also know that, like a lot of communities that don't have room to grow and and don't have a big commercial base, the residents have had to dig in and say, are we going to do overrides? Are we going to, and I saw the vote you took the other night. You're facing an increasing challenge of maintaining high quality services and maintaining the budget and not overburdening residents, finding creative ways of doing that. All communities are facing that. That said, I think you folks here have done a really good job with that. I know that there's affordable housing. It's a challenge. The MBTA new rules that have come down are a challenge. I'm dealing with those in Cohasset. And just the day-to-day governance, things are changing. I mean, it's harder and harder to make things go every day. There's more rules, there's more challenges. I think people are more pressured. The pandemic brought out some of the best in people, and I think it's also challenged, and we're still coming out of that. It's impacted schools. There's a lot of work to do to help to make sure that the schools get everything they need to make sure kids get where they need to be again. It's also opened up opportunities. And again, I think there's opportunities to do new and creative things, and I think you're already doing some of those, and it would be presumptuous of me to come in and tell you that this is the hot thing or that's the hot thing. That said, I think that from what I've read and what I've seen, you really have an interest in engaging, rolling up sleeves, and that's the kind of work I've done for actually 20 years in government.
So expand on that a little bit. Towns need a vision to be successful. You have to work with the board to develop that. What would be your role in that process and setting a path for implementation?
So the town manager is the manager of the day-to-day operations, not the mayor. My job is to help you and other boards develop policy and implement it. Obviously, if you want my thoughts, I'm happy to give them. At the same time, it's not my role to tell the committees or any of you what to do. It's my job to help you get to where you need to be or you want to be. There were things in North Hempstead that were very creative that we didn't do in Cohasset, things in Cohasset that are very creative that we wouldn't do here. Every community is different. That said, the most important thing is to have an open dialogue, to make sure you're valuing everyone's input and gaining everyone's input, because if you're not gaining that, you're not getting the right input, you're not getting to the right place. And then being serious about implementing, because there's going to be challenges. Getting affordable housing into Cohasset with our, everyone's not on public water and sewer. We only have so much room in schools. How do you maintain, and it's also incredibly valuable land. That said, the community buckled down, and there's an affordable housing production plan like you folks have here. And if the next couple of projects come through like they're planning, Cohasset will continue to meet its 40B 10% requirement. That took a lot of work.
Are you at 10% now?
Yeah.
When you started, what were you at?
It was at 10. So I came in just after a large apartment complex. There's only 3,000 units in Cohasset.
Yep.
So it was a little easier to get there. One very large Avalon complex pushed the town from 3% to 10%. That said, there's been a lot of tear down rebuilds and a lot of one-lot build-offs, because land that was not economically viable is now economically viable. And it doesn't take all that much to suddenly come out of compliance. We still don't have that final numbers yet. We're still waiting on that. That said, the expectation is that the town's going to need 30 to 40 more units, and they're in the pipeline. And it's exciting to work on that. At the same time, there's a recognition that just meeting 40B isn't enough. I'm not so worried about police or teachers. I'm worried about public works workers. I can't find them, and they're having to go from further and further away, and I need them for a snowstorm, and I need them to trim trees. And it's not just Cohasset. Other communities are finding the same thing. You need to be able to. You need to be able to staff and have people live at least in somewhat proximity to where they work, because you need them. And if people are going to have to commute an hour or 2 hours every day, they're not going to want to work for you. So it's one of the challenges that everyone's facing.
So coming into the community, you have to, how do you become part of the community, work with the residents and become part of this community?
You engage. The most important thing that I would do the first time I got here is to ask all of you, to meet with all of you, and have you tell me where to go, to meet people. Just whether it's the chamber or the numerous community groups, sit down with the superintendent, meet staff, get out in the community. When I started in Cohasset, some of my first visits, I ended up at the Housing Authority, which a town manager never attended a meeting apparently before I got there, and the Historical Society. Those are two of the places that invited me immediately, and it wasn't that they were the most important things, but they were important because every part of the community is important. Every job's important, and I got active in the Rotary, and we had a beautiful historic farm, the only farm left in town, and it's an educational center. I became was a regular attender of that, helped support the farmers market. Some of the retired select members took me on tours, went to lunch with people. I mean, just being out there, I often, if I go to the farmer's market, I expect people to come and talk to me, and I want people to come to talk to me. We had some outdoor seating that predated the pandemic, and if I was sitting out there, I remember the fire chief one day said, "Hey, people are going to stop and see you." I said, "I know." I said, "That's why I'm sitting here." I said, "If I'm fair game." I said, "I'm sitting having lunch if you want to stop," and people did. They were walking their dogs, they'd say hello. I believe in being approachable and open, and that's how you learn a community, is to get out there and to meet people and to listen, by the way, most importantly. I don't want to tell you what I want to hear. I want to hear what you want to tell me and what's important to you and other members of the community. That's the way I'm going to learn.
So let's talk about the leadership a little bit more, and the fact that in today's society, there's more divisive issues out there. So how do you address that? How do you bring people together, and how do you address that, so that discussions can occur at the table?
I think the world brings us plenty of drama. We do not need to create any more of our own. The pandemic is a very large example of that, but just every day something happens, and it's important that we keep a civil tone and tenor, and I've strived to do that. There's been many folks I've talked to in my tenure in Cohasset, and I'm like, look, I appreciate the history, I said, but I'm not going to go into that foxhole with you or down that rabbit hole. I appreciate you telling me. I'd rather not walk through the minefields if I don't have to. At the same time, everyone's a neighbor, right? Everyone's a neighbor. So, people should treat each other civilly. And it's really important for the select board and the school committee and other boards that really, the planning board, to treat people civilly. That's where it starts from. I tell staff the same thing. I said, look, people can sometimes be rude. We may be at the end point. They've had a tough day. Something happened at home or at work or on the road, and we're the first people they end up interacting with, and they're angry. Don't let that dissuade you. Don't, and please don't react badly. So afterwards we can talk. People don't get to be disrespectful, but, let people try to disarm them, right? So there can be passionate, people can have legitimate public debates about anything. People still need to know that at the end of it, when a decision's made, you move on. That's another thing too. You can't keep relitigating stuff. You make a decision, you move on, and sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. That's the nature of democracy. I try to keep things calm. I'm open to if people want to come and visit me. It's a bigger community. You can't meet with people constantly or never get anything done. At the same time, you need to be open. And I meet with select members regularly. And I try to disarm things if I can. So if I have some people who call me when they're angry, and I let them vent on me, and then they're calm. I won't identify some of the boards where that is, but I'm sure they're similar, and I'm okay with that. So that you get to use me as a sounding board, because I want to make sure that the relationships, are maintained. At the same time, we can't be responsible if somebody's not going to behave themselves. If someone's going to be an idiot, and that's on them. It's not on me if somebody's yelling. It's not on you if somebody's yelling at you. And we shouldn't react to the bait. I know it's hard, but we're not living in a cable world. We're living in a community, and people have to just, be nicer to each other. I know that sounds simplistic, but it's that simple, right? Just don't take the bait. And if it's bad, just walk away at some point, Don't engage.
So given Winchester's, size, location, demographics, talk about maybe some of the issues you think you may see, coming in this community, and how would you set up a system to prioritize those, with the select board to move forward?
I think, John, that last part of your sentence is the key. I want to set up a priority system with the select board. It's not my priorities, it's your folks' priorities. How I may, organize myself is maybe different, but I want to know what the goals are and how you want to proceed with them. And I also want to know that there's an opportunity. I might say, hey, that goal, it may be easier to get here than goal A instead of goal B. And you may say, well, that may be true, Chris, but we're going for B. So sorry. And that's okay. Sometimes, though, it's always important, though, to have that feedback, to let people know, hey, maybe there's another option on this or this. Every board I've served is a little bit different, and I've served committees with the home builders and in North Hempstead. Everyone observes information differently. We've done financial reports, for example, do an executive summary, we do graphs, we do some graphs and charts, and then we have more dense reports. Everybody observes numbers differently. When we did the budget book, there's narrative and numbers and graphs and all kinds of stuff, because everyone observes information differently. So it's important also that I learn the best way to pass information back. Some people like to meet in person. I've done a lot of that with coffee here and breakfast there. Some people it's a quick phone call because they're busy. Maybe it's a walk along the Greenway. Beautiful, by the way. That said, I think having communication regularly helps with those, because also things may change. And maybe, you're all out there in the community, and so are all the other board and committee members. It's important that we stay in good communication, because I can't be everywhere either. So you're seeing things that I may not see. I may see things you're not seeing, or I may be talking to a board or committee that you're not, so there's a good communication flow. I'd say it's a big place, so there's a difference of scale, and some of that I'd have to kind of adapt to. In a smaller town, I was in a much bigger place in New York. There was not as much direct resident interaction. They didn't expect it. 220,000 people, you don't expect to be in town hall all the time. There was still a core group that came regularly, though. And you engage with them. We engage with civic associations, and in the case of North Hempstead, they were elected councilmen, so they had their own territories. So I would work with them on that basis. Robert was handling this area, and Anna was over here, and they had different priorities and issues. It's different when you're all representing the entire community. You live in different neighborhoods, but you're all representing different community, but you have different priorities. Everyone comes to the board with different ideas and thoughts, and it's important that I understand them so that I can help get there if it's possible.
So you've mentioned that you've had to be creative and differently in your two different, town administrative jobs.
Yeah.
Can you cite to it a specific example of how you've had to be creative concerning leadership or management style in Cohasset?
When I got there, there had been a couple of people before me that had kind of riled. It wasn't a good relationship. So I had to make it a priority to meet with members of the board all the time. I had some colleagues in the neighborhood who said I was crazy. I said, no, I have to do this. I said, people have to understand, I have to understand what the challenges are. And so I met regularly with folks, the 5 members of the board, to kind of calm them down. The town had gone through a rough stretch, and I knew that coming in. So I spent lots of time talking and listening, and over time got people to relax and be like, look, I'm the neutral guy in the middle. I'm not here to take sides. I'm not playing politics. I'm here to make you successful. That's my job, is to help the town be successful. You tell me where you want to go. I help to drive the government that way. It took time, but it worked. In North Hempstead, it was different. It didn't have to be that way. So it was much more high level there because it was just so much bigger. So I had to very much pivot to I'm sitting down with you, having coffee and listening on a regular basis, because that's what the situation required. And I work either way. You have to know the audience and adapt that way. Like I said, with graphs and charts, some people are very visual. I had some members of the board who are like, don't give me numbers, Chris, show me graphs. So we did. I had someone create up graphs. I'm not amazing in Excel, but, so I had someone make it look pretty, and it worked. Some people are visual. Some people like to hear it. So a part of that is making sure you're communicating. That's the most important thing. How are you getting through? Are you getting the people the information they need in the form they need it?
So what's your role in the finance situation? So, towns have budgets and various aspects. What role do you play in that?
I meet with the finance team every week, pretty much. The treasurer collector, we have a treasurer collector and a finance director, town accountant. So I meet with them weekly just to see where we are. We happen to have 2 new ones that just started in the last few months. It was a turnover I didn't have to go through, but we did successfully. And now we've closed out last year, and we're building the budget for next year. And I like to know where we are. I mean, I don't need to know our cash flow every day. At the same time, I want to know where we are and what are the challenges. We've had some staff turnover just because of retirements. We had a number of people who have been with the town a long time, and after 35 and 40 years after the pandemic, they retired. They carried with them a lot of knowledge, and so we had to kind of adapt from that. I want to know where we are regularly. When our auditors come in, I meet with them. It's usually a pretty quick job. We're fairly small. In my prior world, I met with the controller regularly too. And again, it's not just I only meet with them on Mondays and that's it, right? I walk the building, and I'll stop into, Jennifer is our finance director. I'll stop into her office and say, hey, what's going on? And we'll just chat. That's another thing that's kind of the way I work. I don't expect people to come to my office. I like to walk around. I think it's important that people understand. I want to know what people do. I want to understand who they are, and I want them to know me. I want them to know they can approach me. I'm not some distant person sitting in an office. I'm there to make their job more effective, I hope. And at the same time, they can help me be more effective. And they need to know that I know what they do, too. And that all plays into it, by the way, because if people are more effective at what they do, you spend money more efficiently. So it all comes down to the budget at the end of the day. You have to make sure that said, the budget is an expression of values, and you want to make sure you're implementing it the right way. So it's not just knowing the budget. It's knowing that the work that's being done in the field is actually the work that we're supposed to be funding.
So briefly, what's your role relative to, let's say, financial forecasting, bond ratings, and reviewing financial policies?
I've been involved in all of that. We took the town to AAA and Cohasset my second year. Again, building on the foundation that folks had done. And I've done a lot of work with bond rating agencies. My prior community in North Hempstead was a much bigger scale, and we were going to bond a lot on capital projects. So we had a regular relationship with the rating agencies. S&P is who we used, and that's who Cohasset uses too. Same thing with forecasting. Now, at the same time, I am not an accountant. I mean, I have an economics major, but that was many years ago. So I get math. I understand math. I'm good at it. But I want to hear from in this case, the controller. I want to hear what's going on. I want to be able to be sure what's happening, and I want to be involved. I mean, I've always been involved in the rating agency calls and the forecasting programs. I moderated the town's fiscal forecasting committee that was done about 5-6 years ago, that evolved from something else, and now we're evolving back into that kind of model. as Cohasset looks at a new school, building a new school. So what can happen? So I've been involved in that, small scale and large scale.
Did you have a question, Mario? Sorry.
Yeah, what is your specific process for putting together next year's fiscal year budget?
You're kind of living I'm always looking back and looking ahead at the same time because you want to know where you were and what the select board goals are and what the community's goals are. But it's department based. I want departments to say, hey, what do we need to do our job? The way it works in Cohasset, the select board gives a budget message, and the advisory committee, which is the equivalent of the finance committee, gives a message that goes to select board. It's like, here are the primary goals. We want to stay within, the tax cap. We want to, prioritize these things, and then work with departments to do that. So a memo goes out about this time of the year. We do a series of meetings in January. We go over departmental budgets for the next year, and then do a presentation to the select board, and then the advisory committee vets it for about a month and change going into town meeting. That's how the Cohasset process works. Northampton's a little more, we built a lot of stuff internally. The comptroller and I and her staff would sit down and we'd get department input and roll through things. Every town's a little bit different. I'm sure the model here is a little different too. That said, you've got to get feedback from the people who do it every day. What do they need? What's working? What's not? And at the same time, it's also, what does the community want? The community wants more money. This is just a generic example for tree trimming. Well, make sure that there's money in the budget in DPW for tree trimming. Now, if the public works superintendent says, we don't have a problem with trees, it's potholes, then you come back and say, hey, we really need more money in potholes. It's one of the reasons that the management system in North Hempstead was very helpful. It identified trouble that we weren't necessarily seeing, and it was allowed us to redirect resources better and budget plan better.
Thank you.
Chris, what is your approach to personnel management, and what do you see as potential needs or issues in a community such as Winchester?
So fundamentally, the most valuable resource, the most valuable resource in a community is its residents, right? It's people. The most valuable resource the government has is its staff. And it's important that people feel valued and valuable, that their jobs are important and that they're important too. You want to treat people fairly, obviously, and pay them reasonably. At the same time, it's just as important, if not more important, to recognize their contributions to the organization, their goals, their training needs. When I came into Cohasset, the select board said, create an HR function. There was none. There was benefits and stuff, but so we did. And I now have my third full-time director in place now, and it's evolved into getting people, helping people develop. We had a great example recently where a couple of years ago we promoted someone to the assistant assessor. She wasn't there yet, but we bought into her. She finished all her certifications. She was amazing. Unfortunately, she's now been lured away by another community as the chief assessor. That said, the investment, she was in my office, emotional that she was leaving. At the same time, I was very grateful for the work we were able to do together. So it's not always great to see people leave. At the same time, you want to help them develop their careers, and that's something we've made a big priority. Get people's certifications. It's not just for its own sake, but it also says to the community, hey, your staff is actually training. We're investing. We're trying to be the best that we can be, and best stewards of the resources you've entrusted us with. We also do recognition. I know it seems small, but we do this thanks for your service every Thanksgiving now week. We do it the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, and we recognize people for their service. 10, 15, 20 years. And the retirees from that past year, we just did that. And it's just a nice, first year I did it, people said, I don't know what's coming. Well, people came. They brought their families. And it wasn't anything fancy. We give people certificates and books of Cohasset history. We've upped the gifts. They're a little nicer now, within the limits, of course. But and it's a nice night. We just put out some nice food from local restaurants, and it's a nice evening. And that morphed into the board and committee recognition as an additional piece on the Monday. That's and we also we bring in a local ice cream known as ice cream truck. I'm sure you have something equivalent here. We'll pop that up once or twice a year, and people could get a free ice cream cone just as a thank you. And we've done an employee barbecue event because we have a couple of police officers who do competitive smoking. They're a barbecue, so they've been doing it now for 6-7 years. We took a little break during the pandemic because we couldn't get people in the room together. And it's just a nice staff that they do vegetarian stuff and, brisket and other things, and they have fun doing it. And everybody just likes to come down, have some food, just hang out. And so we do an afternoon in June. Little things like that matter. And it's not like you have to replicate that exact thing. Every community is a little bit different. But those little things make a big difference. We also have a big wellness program. So we're a Maya partner, which I understand you folks are too. And we were an early pioneer, a partner on wellness. So we have an employee wellness committee, and I stay away from it. I said, look, whatever you need, develop it and come back. We've gotten, the desks that go up and down and ergonomic chairs, and we've done all kinds of programs. In fact, my communications director is now the chair of it. He's taken over. So, and that has been really important. Some people have really changed their lives. I mean, I should take part in more programs. I could use a little more exercise. But that's been great, and it's been employee-driven. And we even have a vending machine that we stock with healthy snacks. We want a grant for that. I actually stock it sometimes. It's actually kind of relaxing just to be sticking vending stuff in. But it's because we want people to participate. And I can keep going on and on about employee stuff. But just last week, my communications director gave me the story today that a local online paper did. During the pandemic, we had a problem with seniors, being stuck at home, and we were part of the Metco program, and they did a big wreath sale every year. And so they were having trouble selling them during the pandemic. So we bought a bunch, and we had staff decorate wreaths, and we had the elder affairs identify seniors in need. We just did it for the third year. People loved doing it. I'm not particularly artistic, so I stay away. But people had a lot of fun, and we got a great little story out of it. And my communications director delivered them this year, and people were just so grateful. And it's not like we took their picture and put them on the front page. It wasn't like that. But it was a nice. People had fun. It was a little break, and every department got a little tag. It said, "From your friends at the planning department," or IT. Those little things, and again, that was organic. That was developed not by me, but by staff. Let's try something like that, right? I want to hear what staff want to do. How do they want to develop? Some people do book clubs and stuff. I've never been able to do that. What will get staff engaged, and what will help develop, and also build loyalty to, I'd love to have people stay for 20, 30 years. It's not really how people are working these days, but you don't want people to come for 3 years and leave either, because you train them when they leave. And it's hard to get people in a municipal circumstance in the government. So you value people, they stay.
So that's a good, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, Chris, can you just talk a little bit about your experience with collective bargaining and maybe state an instance where you had a difficult or challenging collective bargaining session or contract and you resolved it, and how you saw the light and how you got that done?
So I've been negotiating contracts for 20 years, and I did a lot of labor training at law school. I worked a year with a labor arbitrator and did a lot of work. I was on the Labor Law Journal. I was an editor of that. So, but I also negotiated contracts in North Hempstead and in Cohasset. So I've done all of them, from little ones to big ones, and the most contentious one was the one we just completed with the fire department. That went on for 2 years. We were literally at the JLMC arbitration, and we were able to pivot with the select board participation and get a deal. I won't go into the details of it all. That said, it got very difficult. There were times when there were a lot of arrows slung at me and ugly things said in emails. And as a human being, you're like, that's pretty disgusting. At the same time, you have to step back and disassociate yourself. You said, okay, I'm not going to respond to that. You take a breath and you engage. And people got, unfortunately, a lot of it was also during the pandemic. And when you're not able to sit face to face for a labor negotiation, it's awful. Particularly, fire unions seem to be a little more intense about this. I think that's the case everywhere. That said, we reached a deal. We're at peace. And I think it was a fair deal. And it did go to literally the 12th hour practically. That said, we got there. It took 2 years. But we kept focused that a deal could be made. There were many times, Rich, when I didn't think we were going to get a deal. Because we thought we had something, then it disappeared. Just keep persevering. You keep going back. Because at the end of the day, a negotiated settlement is always better. It's always better. than something imposed by somebody else. It just is. And we got there. So that was the most contentious one I've been involved in.
What is the makeup of your specific town manager office right now in capacity? Do you have an assistant? Do you have admins? What do you use?
We have an admin. We have there's an HR director and an assistant who also doubles in my office. She backs up my assistant too. And then I have a communications director, which is a new position, which, by the way, every community should have. Someone who just lives communication issues. And it's about making sure boards and committees are communicating their information to residents. That he does social media updates regularly. I do a 5-thing update every week to the community. He's hosted shows. I host some shows on cable. So he's in my office. In fact, he's going to be emceeing the tree lighting over the weekend. I'm going to be with friends in New York. So he's in there. And I have an assistant. I didn't have an assistant. And I had someone who got hired, overqualified in the public works as the assistant. She became the procurement director. She ended up running capital projects. And eventually the board looked at me and said, why isn't she the assistant town manager? I said, I was waiting for you to tell me. I said, so she's the assistant now. Because we're doing many major projects. We're doing work at a level much greater than you think for our size, including looking at a brand new middle school, high school, and a brand new town hall. We're active in municipal resiliency because of the climate and the water. So we've done a lot of work with complete streets, with green energy, the Green Communities program. We got into that when I started, and we've done a lot of work with that. So there's kind of a core of us, I guess 6 of us, but I meet with everybody all the time. So my finance director and I talk all the time. My public works director and I talk all the time. The police chief and I talk all the time. There's a new fire chief. He's been in the department a little bit longer. He's getting his sea legs. I don't see him quite as much. And we all kind of have our turf, right? I'm not very hierarchical. I mean, I expect to know what's going on. Usually, if I got a call from the police chief on a weekend, it's usually not good news. But I want him to call me and tell me what's happening. Or I want the public works director. We had a water main break a few weeks ago. He was in my office explaining what was happening, and we talked through it. And thankfully, they found a solution that's going to work, I hope, through the winter, and we'll do something more in the spring. So it's a lean staff, I think, but it's grown because the board has said, hey, we want HR. Okay, well, we need to finance and fund it. And then, we need communication. So the board funded it, and we've staffed it appropriately. And it's paid major dividends. I think the community is much more informed now as a result. Because who's telling the story, right? If we're not telling the story, who's telling the story? It's people filling in the gaps. People fill in the gaps with the worst possible ideas every time. Without hearing something, it's always bad. Oh my God, I didn't hear from them. Something's broken. No, it's not necessarily true. It's just, we haven't let you know. So
Chris, that's a good segue. The town here has proactively identified communications within the town as a priority. So how would you approach a communication plan and strategy, both internal with departments and external with the residents to let them know what's happening in town and what the priorities of the town are?
you have a nice webpage. I've seen it. And it's a core of information. It should be regularly updated, and people can access things when they need to. You have to have a presence on social media. Not a particularly big fan of Twitter. For government purposes. Facebook is there. I think many people are on that, and there's other vehicles like that. Instagram is a great place to put photos. That said, someone should be living this every day. There should be a person whose job it is to manage communication. And when I say that, I don't mean PR. I don't mean a spokesperson. I mean someone who's helping committees get their message out. If there's some big issue coming up with the zoning board, making sure the public is aware of it. Justin has organized community meetings we're doing through a zoning conversation now in the community. We've had 3 public sessions over the last couple of months. And he's helped organize it, made sure it's on Facebook Live, it's on Zoom, it's on our TV station. He's even made sure there's cookies and pizza to make sure that people came. Working with our planning board, the planning director, she managed the content with the planning board chair and the zoning folks. And then Justin literally went out to soccer fields and to the Seabird Coffee and made sure there were flyers everywhere. We decide what it is we need to reach. The select board may say, hey, the tree lighting, make sure everybody knows about it. Okay, we make sure everybody knows about it. Or the zoning hearing, make sure that everybody knows that these public meetings are happening. We did a postcard, so Justin, we'd sit down, work out a plan, and he'd implement it. I mean, I have lots of great ideas. I was a journalist in a past life. As a town manager, you just don't have the time. I mean, I go from talking to you, and then I'm talking to you, and then some resident has an issue, or then it's something with Public Works, and then it's 7:00 at night. And then you haven't sent that email that you need to send. You need someone to do that. So whoever you end up hiring for this job, make sure that you include in the budget money for a communications person. And not a PR person, someone who's gonna live social media, and most importantly, help committees communicate too. Because there's lots of great information from committees. We have a big storehouse now on YouTube of all committee meetings. Everyone can watch any committee meeting they want. Everything's on Zoom. So it's archived. So he manages that too, make sure everything gets posted within 24 hours. Little things like that
Chris,
help.
what about internal communications amongst departments and staff?
I meet regularly.
Staff at all levels.
So we have an internal email system, so we send out emails internally. We used to have a system, I can't remember the name of it, I think it was called Airbo, where messages got pushed out. It wasn't really all that effective, so we don't use that. I have a small operation, so literally if we want to communicate, I can walk the building. We do a lot face-to-face because we're small enough to do that. And I do regular staff meetings. I do, one of the things that the pandemic allowed us to do was to have all staff meetings for folks who want to participate, because you can't pull everybody into a room and stop the government. So we do a Zoom meeting at least quarterly with whoever staff want to come, and just do regular updates with folks. And that's been a nice bonus that the pandemic opened us up to. And I meet with core department heads every couple of weeks, and a larger group of managers about every month or two, formally, because you have to have formal meetings to make sure you're actually meeting. I want to see people informally all the time, but you need to set aside that dedicated time. And then we do, we also put messages out into paychecks and stuff. Even though we've pretty much gone away from paper, everyone gets emails, so we can push out information about all of the wellness programs I was telling you about before. Everyone gets that. Either every bulletin board gets posted. There's a bulletin board, and I think in every one of our break rooms, we post messages on those. We've sent out emails to people. And then when, like in Public Works, we don't always have emails, it goes to the central office, we make sure that everyone sees it on the shift. Same thing with police and fire, that things get posted, so they know that there's a Pilates class or a barbecue, or did you know this is happening with, Social Security or, Medicare or something.
How do you resolve conflicts and disputes, and briefly include an example from Cohasset of when you had to deal with the polarizing issue?
For the community itself, or okay, just in
Tell
general? So you never want de-escalation.
You can pick whether it's
Yeah,
a conflict
right.
with the board, a
No.
conflict with the department, or a conflict with some member of the community.
So de-escalation, there's little things that happen all the time, right? I try to de-escalate immediately whenever possible. So the town, when I first came on board, there was a plan to build a senior center. It ended up getting built. There was a lot of contention in how the process went. And then when the building got built, all of a sudden it was like, oh, the town needs to take it, but you got to buy it from us. And there was a whole lot of contention about that. And we had this beautiful building. It was not 100, and there was a deficit from the group that built it. It was a private entity. And I spent the better part of 6 months getting the board to come together, and they finally did. And not that I dictated an outcome, I just wanted to know what the outcome was. And then we did some negotiations, and there were times when the internal stuff got very ugly again, but you have to disassociate yourself from that. I mean, people were throwing slings and arrows at me because I happen to be the embodiment of the government at the table, right? It's not personal to me. And even if it was, I don't take it personally, right? You can't take stuff personally when you do this, even if it's meant that way sometimes. And to make a long story short, we were able to get through it, and we got the senior center. Even to the closing. At the closing, there was contention. There was a gentleman who just wouldn't give up an issue, and they had to pull him aside, and they told him to stop his group, and we made the deal. We passed the check, and we got the senior center. It's a beautiful building. It's one of our most. It's very active. It was incredibly useful during the pandemic. It's useful every day for our seniors. I was there for Thanksgiving. It was great, but the process for that was ugly. And one of the things that came out of that, I don't want that ever to happen again. One of the reasons it got so ugly is because the process was allowed to break down, and it was complicated. I don't want to go into all the details of it. That shouldn't have happened, and it cost a tremendous amount of energy to get the project back on track. So process sometimes people are like, oh, it's boring, it's slow. Well, there's a reason for that. you want to make sure you stay in the guardrails. Sometimes a pandemic or something else comes and you have to do something different. That's okay. Every day you shouldn't be jumping over the guardrails. I used to have that debate with my boss in North Hempstead. He was a very dynamic political figure. I'm like, John, we got to stay on the guardrails sometimes. I said, this is not, at the time, Palestinian-Israeli peace. Now it's a Ukrainian-Russian peace or something, right? We're running a local government. We don't have to bounce off the guardrails all the time. But he'd like to, be exciting. So that was that.
I'm sorry.
Would you also be able to describe how you manage, not necessarily conflict, but like having challenging conversations, and if you had to deliver bad news or to be the bad guy on something, how do you manage that?
You need to be empathic and listening. You don't want to just drop stuff on people. I actually carry a couple of cards from a program I went to at ICMA. I go to professional development programs. It's a refresher. Like, how do you deal with stuff like that? As a reminder, you need to plan for what you're doing, and it depends on what the circumstance is, right? Firing somebody is a lot different than saying, "Hey, your performance review is not so good," or you didn't get the raise. Fortunately, I haven't had to do a lot of firings, which is good. That said, sometimes things aren't working out. You have to sit down with somebody and help correct them. If it gets to my level, it's generally not good. Or it's with a major department head. Fortunately, it hasn't happened so much. It's good to identify things as it become a problem. Having an HR office that's robust helps with that. One of the things that we've made a priority of is letting employees know early. You only get big raises once a year. You get your step raise or whatever, and we tie them to performance. I don't want people to come to their raises and suddenly for the first time realize they're not getting a step raise. So sometimes there's a crisis. Somebody's having something happen in their life. We've had that happen too. And you make sure there's resources for them. Maybe it's the employee assistance program or something like that. Or we've had circumstances where something awful's happened with the police department. We bring in resources to help them deal with a terrible situation. Or someone's going through a crisis, and we try to help them out as much as we can. At the same time, you also have to know that sometimes you can't help people. And there may be difficult moments where you have to say something's not working anymore. Those things shouldn't surprise you. Sometimes they do, right? Life does that. But most of those, you should know what's happening, and you should be trying to address them early. Is that?
We had a couple more areas, but I want to make sure the board has the opportunity to, ask your questions, and we're hitting, later in the interview, so I'll let the chair make a decision as to how you want to proceed here.
Why don't we see if anybody has any questions?
I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead, John.
So Chris, you've talked a lot about taking direction from the board, and I'm really interested in understanding how you would advise us looking around a corner, and maybe when you got to Cohasset, did you look at the way they're organized, whether it's departments, positions, allocation of resources, and so what kind of guidance would we be getting from you in that area?
I think so let me give you some examples of what happened. And again, it's unique to the circumstance, right? So when I started Cohasset, I had something like 27 direct reports. It was crazy, right? And as I brought in HR staff, my first HR director said, this is not possible. This is crazy. You got to fix this, which required us to change how we organized. Now, I have powers within the Town Manager Act and Cohasset to do some of that. That said, I can't just do it unilaterally. I want to make sure the board is aware of that. And then we had to go to town meeting with some things. We had to change some language. We had to change some positions, and we did. So you have to identify it and then explain it, and then say, hey, we really need this. We need to go in this direction. Here's why. As a result, we streamlined. Public Works was the first place. We had water and sewer, and engineering, and tree and park, and they were all reporting to me, kind of. And it's like, that's crazy. I said, that doesn't make sense. We had a water and sewer board too, so we happened to have a great town engineer. We were able to coordinate all of that. We had to tweak the bylaws to change the structure a little bit. And it worked, so I went back, and again, so the board had to do that. We had researched it, we brought it back, we said, hey, we need to change how we operate here, and it worked. The same thing happens the other way. The board says, hey, we need more planning. Okay, well, we didn't have a planner. So I went back, we researched it, we said, here's a plan for a planner, and here's what it's gonna cost. Okay, I mean, there's very little, you could tweak and redirect, right? You could change the direction from here to here. That said, you can't double it and then expect it to happen without some additional resources. And part of my job is to say, hey, John, that's a great idea. We went back and looked, it's going to take another staff position. is there money in the budget to do that? Or in the alternative, we're going to stop doing something else. We all live within finite means. So I like to have that dialogue regularly. I also try to look creatively. I want people to, vision too and say, well, what, it's very easy to get caught in the day-to-day. There's so much going on. And all of you are volunteers, right? I mean, you have lives. I mean, so you may have a dream about something, but, you have work to do or, practice to go to or family things or whatever. And even me, I mean, I'm going all the time. It's good to take a step back once in a while and vision. And we've built that into the annual select board goals. They sit down, they have like a little visioning session and think about goals and long-term projects. Some of them succeed, some of them don't. That said, it's important to do that every once in a while. Take a step back and say, hey, what's something creative we haven't tried? And it's also, it's not a top-down thing, right? I might hear something from a community group. I'll bring it back. Hey, this group wants to try this. Sometimes you just step back out of the way. You make sure people know about it. You let people try. And one of the things I try to do with staff too is like, hey, come up with a creative program. We'll give it a try. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Okay, as long as we don't lose a lot of money or hurt anybody, right?
Right.
But don't be afraid to fail. I mean, it's okay. I mean, if you don't try things, you're never going to know if it's going to work. So you need to be able to do that. So I'd want to, again, I don't want to be presumptuous. You need to spend time in the community to really understand a lot of that stuff.
Right.
My point is that I'm open. I'm also going to ask questions. I'm going to say, hey, why do you do it this way? What is this? Why do you do it? Why is this process this way? And it's not because I'm being dumb. It's just because I want to ask. You only get a first opportunity to do that. And it's good to do that. It's good to come fresh and say, why does it work that way? Why do you have your meetings that way? Why do you organize the agenda that way? I mean, I've had boards change their form of agendas multiple times too, because it flowed. Different people had different styles. Different chairs have different styles. So you sometimes have to tweak how you do meetings. I've seen a lot of different things in a lot of different places. That said, it's all developed by a collaboration as well. So I expect that I would talk to all of you and your successors, whoever they may be over time, regularly about where we're going and what you want to do.
Thank you.
Other questions from board members? Go ahead, Dan.
You've talked, I think, a little bit about this in terms of coming into Cohasset and sort of new programs or priorities that you had, but can you talk about your approach to managing change and how you look at both when it's kind of a new exciting change, what that looks like, but also if there's maybe a necessary and difficult change, how do you work that with the town hall staff?
So I can give you a lot of examples of how I've done that, but I think the core of it is you need to tell people what's going on, engage them, and explain. And if there's going to be real change happening, it has to be supported. Like this board would have to support it. If there's a major change in something, there has to be an understanding that the board is behind it. Otherwise, people are not going to buy into it. And then people, it has to be supported at the top. It has to be bought into by the folks who have to live it. And it may be difficult. I mean, I've been through circumstances where we've had to change job titles and positions. We've eliminated some jobs and changed some jobs. The 301 system in North Hempstead was probably the biggest change. We directed all calls to a central call center. That was a pretty radical step because people used to, Tommy Turner was the highway superintendent. People would just call him, and that was not effective. We didn't even know, by the way. He could be doing 5 things we didn't even know was happening. So we had to break him of that. And my boss was like, we are doing this. Okay, so I had the backing of the boss, and we went to Tommy and said, we're going to redirect your calls. It's going to destroy things. I said, no, it's not. And then when we did, and he suddenly realized he had all this time now to actually do his job, it changed. And then when his staff realized, again, it took time. It took a lot of meetings. It took a lot of conversations. They were getting recognition for work that we never knew was happening because we were now identifying it. They're like, oh, okay. I'm going through that now in Cohasset with our, again, highways are very old school, okay? Our superintendent grew up in town. He knows everything. And I'm scared for the day he finally retires because there's so much in his brain. But everything's on paper for him. Now we have a new assistant, and we just reworked her entire position, so she's now like the administrative director of the department. And she's doing all the computer stuff. So she's bringing him along very gently because we have to move all that knowledge and all that stuff into permanent records that we can actually use and transfer to the next generation of people. Not been easy. He won't do the computer stuff, but that's okay. So we assigned someone to work with him. He's fine with that. They've developed a good working relationship, and it's not easy. He won't. Sometimes you find people just won't do it, but you have to find a way to work around that, because, again, computerizing records, that still happens all the time, right? There's still records that are on an old system or not being done the same way, or you're moving to a new set of software. There's a reason for it. It shouldn't have been arbitrarily. Sometimes, it is. The state may say, you must do it this way now. This is the way it is. Well, you have to explain to people and work alongside them with it. But you gotta be willing to fight through there's gotta be tough moments. You gotta be willing to work through them too. If the change is necessary and people are bought in, you can't let resistance stop it either. And there may be some moments that are a little more challenging than others. But I found for the most part, as long as you explain it, you buy in, and you work with people, most of the time they'll come around. And if it's a change that's being developed to make things work better and they see it's working better, like, okay, hey, we bought in. We did that with retiree teachers. We moved their health plan. Moving retirees' health plans, it's a third rail. They were picketing practically. We had our staff meet with each, on the phone with every teacher who was retired. By the end of the process, they were bringing jam into the woman, homemade jam. I'm not kidding you, not all of them, right? But it took a tremendous amount of work to show that we weren't actually hurting anybody. But there was nothing more dramatic than changing a health plan when you're already retired. But we did it, and Maya was a wonderful partner, and they were right alongside us, and the town saved money. So at the end of the day, it really did work out. You just have to you have to be prepared for the pain as well.
Can I just pick up on
Sure.
one thing from that? The other piece you mentioned, sort of some department heads. How do you approach hiring sort of for those big visible positions, and are there any key qualities that you look for?
I want people who like to work with other people. Skills are really important. You can train skills. You can't train attitude and energy and fit. I know that sounds like a weird word. You want people who are, again, if particularly it's a public position, they have to like work with the public. They have to be able to deal with that back and forth. And everyone's not there. In Cohasset, we place a premium on being able to do multiple things. I mean, I had a staff member in my office. She had to do multiple things. It just wasn't her thing. She went to another community where she was just doing benefits. And that was her thing. My office, I mean, the person who now has that job has to do 7 things sometimes. But she likes that. So you have to make sure you fit for the position that you need. Some people are maybe masters at that one thing, and you need them to be the master of that one thing. In smaller and bigger organizations, sometimes you can have that. In smaller organizations, you generally can't. So I want people who are team players, and I mean that they like to be collaborative. They can also work independently. They're willing to ask questions. I mean, I'd rather people ask a question than go off and do something wrong. There's no dumb questions. Ask a question, and if you need help, collaborate. Been pretty successful in hiring, and you generally and at different times, a different person might be the right fit for the same position because the position may be different. And it's also really important that you bring a diversity of approach to things, and that's we have it's generational as much as anything. So we have people who span multiple generations in our organization, and folks who are in their 20s do things differently than folks in their 50s. It's just, it's not a judgment, it's just a reality, and you have to make sure people with different work styles work together really well too. So some of it is just what does the department need at the time, and it may be one person one day and somebody else 3 years from then. Is that?
Other questions from members?
I just had one quick question. Thanks, Rich, and thanks, Chris, for coming in. On the technology front, municipalities, especially smaller ones, it seems to be the thing that gets short shrift in the budget. And how important do you think it is to invest in modernization and technology to really protect the town, but also to move the town forward?
It is absolutely critical. When I got to Cohasset, there was really no network. There was no phone network. There was no real IT network. There were databases, and it was being managed by from someone's home in another state. And the more, when I first got on board, there was other things to do, right? As I delved more into it, it became frightening. And then we had a challenge, and now we have a staff of 5. It's town and school. They cover both. CIO, deputy CIO, and 3 staff. And They manage everything. We're actually now going through a change. We're going to take one of our data centers and probably put it in the cloud, but it's going to mean more operating and less capital. So we have to figure out how we're going to fund that. We've been doing intense cybersecurity training because, quite frankly, you don't want to be caught in a bad situation. So we actually did some training a few years ago, and our cyber cop actually got caught up in a fishing expedition that we did. Thank God, it didn't hurt anything. He was a little embarrassed by that, but we do that. We require staff to do training. We even open it up to committee members because they're on our network, right? They're on our servers with emails, and we stress. I have a great CIO. When I needed a CIO, we had nothing, right? I called the state and said, "What's going on? We're going to start organizing meetings." So they created a staff share group. I was the only town manager who showed up, and I went regularly. And when we posted the job, 5 of the people around that table applied for the job, and I hired one of them. And he's still there. He's phenomenal. And by making the case, we've actually built a fiber loop, which we now have our own town fiber loop. So we're not beholden to Verizon or Comcast or anybody else, particularly since some of them don't care about that business anymore. And in my prior community, we actually had microwave dishes communicating all over the town. I mean, we built a very robust IT system because it's a backbone. I mean, it's not a nice thing to have. It's fundamental. You have to have a working IT system, or you can't do your job in government anymore. You just can't. And it's as much because you have to communicate with the outside world, with public health, with police, with schools, but also internally. It's not the cell network. I mean, I carry 2 cell phones. I have my work one and my personal one. But you need to be able to keep databases secure. You need to be able to, move to app. People like to have apps and stuff, so you have to develop and support them. You need to be able to have financial software that'll actually do reporting. That'll actually, we have a software that's not so great, but we're not quite ready to move on to something else. It's been a big area of investment for the town. My prior community, the data center looked like the back end of remember the Wayne's World? Remember Wayne's World on Saturday Night Live? Or am I dating myself? It was like we're on the set of Wayne's World, okay, except with servers, right?
Yeah.
And my IT director, we hired a guy, and he was phenomenal. And if he had told me his salary, I would never have hired him because his company relocated to the Midwest, and he and his wife were not going to the Midwest. So he applied for the job, did a phenomenal job, and he created a data center that looked like a miniature version of those old IBM commercials, right? And wasn't quite that big, but he took us from the 1950s to the 21st century in 2 years, and it made it possible for us to do 311. It made it possible to survive Hurricane Sandy. And the 311 center that was built off that became how we got seniors to grocery stores and booked flu shots. So technology becomes a platform for so many other things. The network we built in Cohasset became the platform for cyber government, e-government, and also for remote learning. If we didn't have that, if we hadn't done that investment, nobody knew the pandemic was coming, but if we had done, we could not have done the remote education like we did. It just wouldn't have been possible. So that investment is incredibly critical.
How did you fund that? You said it was
Capital. Yeah, so we made the case. I mean, we went and pitched, and I remember the capital chairman said, "Well, we're taking it on faith." I'm like, "Well, Sam, it's actually here's the it was a big dip, but and they funded it. And when it got built and people saw it work, they spent more money. And again, it's the public's money, right? You need to justify what you're doing. You need to back it up, and then you need to show you actually produce. If you do that, people are generally more willing to give you more and say, "Okay, that works," and you show results. The meetings were intense initially. I mean, we went from spending very little to spending $1 million to build this network and to get the servers. And, the stuff breaks down, too. Right? We're now going through a big server replacement, and we don't have tons of them, but they're not cheap. And,
So, Chris, can I just interrupt you for 1 second?
Sorry.
And I won't take much time, Chris, but
I could talk
to me,
to Mr. House,
trust is important in government. No trust doesn't work. And so it sounds to me like you subscribe to that. So when you're going and you're requesting funding for a project, how do you report back to the citizens that you were a good steward of the money, you executed the plan, or if it blew up, you said, "Hey, it blew up because we had the unexpected consequences of doing this, making this investment"?
You need to be transparent and open about the successes and the failures. And having a communications person is also helping us do more of that. That said, we reported regularly the capital budget. There was always an update. Okay, where are the projects? Where are we? Have we bought that police cruiser? What's happening with the IT network? And there's regular reporting back to them on the advisory committee. And we try to do it with the select board. I mean, the select board's a little harder sometimes because there's other things going on. That said, I prefer as high visibility as possible so people see where their tax money is going. The budget book has that in it too. We developed a big budget book, which has the whole capital plan in there and details. It's not just numbers. It's like, here's the departmental narrative, here's the capital narrative. So the police cruiser is this, okay, and we bought this, server for this. And again, sometimes things don't work, and that's okay. I mean, it's not always okay. You don't want to lose a lot of money. We've had some construction. We're in litigation over a construction project where the contractor went as wildly sideways as I've ever seen in my entire professional career. And we went through a mediation a couple months ago. And I don't know where that's going, but sometimes that happens. And the board's fully aware. And the project got done, thank God. The permit happened. We're still unwinding the unfortunate part of it. We changed our process after that. For that one particular example, we changed how we project manage after that because we were letting an engineering firm design and then manage the work, and it didn't work. So you learn lessons, and you got to be honest about it too. So
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, anything else?
Any other questions?
Are we all set at this point? We've been covered a lot of areas this evening, but I just want to make sure the board members feel we've covered, the areas you want to address.
Can I have one more?
Sure, go ahead.
If you could just give us maybe, if you were appointed a town manager, what would be maybe the top 3 accomplishments that you had 1 year from now, or within the first year of your tenure?
Well, I'd want to establish myself in the community and be a place where people felt comfortable talking and working with me, right? I'd want to be a part of Winchester, and I don't necessarily mean living next door, but I'd want to make sure I'd want to have gotten the board's goals achieved as much as possible, whatever the goals you have, and I'd like to have made some progress towards some of the other longer term, either identifying or moving along the way some of the longer term, dream goals that you folks have, and to, again, not mine, but yours. I want to know them, and I want to really help, make sure that we carve out some time to think about creative things that, that you'd want to do that maybe you always want to have that list in case something pops up. ARPA, right? Nobody knew that was coming. Maybe there's a state grant, state does another grant, and all of a sudden there's money for something that, oh, we didn't know we could do that. Boom, You got to have those dreams a little bit too, and that visioning, so you can take advantage of them when they come. So.
Anything else? No? Well, Garth, it's time for a closing statement here. So,
I played saxophone, I didn't play guitar. So
give you an opportunity for a closing statement to the board.
So I thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to sit here and engage with you. I know this is it's a tight time. There's not only so much opportunity. I've enjoyed the back and forth. You can obviously Google me in a way that we never could have before. You can watch me at town meeting. You can see what I've done. And I want to say that I really do appreciate the opportunity here. I think that that the kind of collaborative, engaging style I have that I've had for a while that is effective in this kind of in your kind of a circumstance. I think Winchester is a place where I could be really successful, not just for me but for all of you. I think I could really. I think the style and the skills that I bring and the history I have could really work well in a place like this. And again, I've had long tenures. I'm not looking to hop around. You can see that on my resume. I spent a decade in North Hempstead. It's 9 years. I'm the longest serving town manager in Cohasset history. So I'm not looking to leap. This is an opportunity that presented itself. It opened up unexpectedly from my perspective, and I'm here because I think I can help you, achieve the goals that are in front of you, the goals you don't necessarily know you have yet, and make some progress on some of those wish lists over the next, hopefully, decade. It's an exciting time to be in government. I really believe that public service is a public trust. I believe in this. I know all of you do. You wouldn't be sitting around the table if you didn't believe this stuff. And I enjoy that, given that engagement every day. It's what makes as challenging as this job is, and I have colleagues, my colleagues and I chat periodically, and unless you're a town manager or a town administrator, you don't really understand what it's like. But how rewarding it can be. It really can be incredibly rewarding to help communities get there. I don't need to be the mayor. I don't need to be the person in the spotlight. I want communities to succeed. I want you folks to succeed, and I want to be part of that every day with small things and large things alike is really rewarding. And again, I hope we can continue the conversation. So,
Chris, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for coming in. We'll take a 5-minute break and start our next interview at 7:15.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Stand recess.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, welcome back, everyone watching at home. I know we have a large crowd watching at home, probably. Welcome back. We are back for our second interview this evening. With us, joining us now is Anthony Ansaldi. I hope I pronounced that right.
You did.
Great. It must be the vowel on the back of my name, too.
That's right.
But welcome. We look forward to spending this hour with you or so. The format's going to be similar as our first interview. We have about 45 minutes of set questions that John and Ray will ask. And then board members at any time during that period, feel free to jump in with questions or follow-up questions. And then we'll open up to board members to ask any questions they want at the end there as well. So with that, I'll let John take it away again.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chair, and Anthony, welcome, congratulations on being one of the 3 finalists here in Winchester for the town manager's position. And I'll start off as I did the last time. What are you doing here? So if you can give us a little bit of your background and why you're interested in this position specifically in Winchester.
Sure. Okay. So thank you. I'll start out with some personal information about myself. I'm born and raised in Medford, Massachusetts, right next door is a neighboring community. I attended the Medford Public School Systems, proud of that. Currently live in the city of Malden with my wife of 6 years, and our blended family is 5 boys, ranging from the ages of 26 to 21. Been very involved in community with the boys and coaching their little leagues and football and hockey and parent teachers president and just really involved in the community. And it really led to the passion that I have today with being in municipal government. Professionally, I'm extremely proud of my 30 plus years working in government, where I started out working for the Department of Revenue. From there, I went to the Middlesex Sheriff's Office. And then the last almost 20 years has been in municipal government, most of the time spent in Brookline, then in Wenham and Littleton. Some professional associations that I've been part of or are part of. I sat on the executive board for the Massachusetts Municipal Managers Association, sat on the advisory board for the Massachusetts Regional Transit Authority, as well as the MBTA Advisory Board as Littleton's representative. Metropolitan Area Planning Council, I'm Littleton's representative. North Shore Regional 911 Center, I was on the executive board there. And I'm in my second term on the Joint Labor Management Committee, or the JLMC, and I was appointed by Governor Baker. And the reason for applying to Winchester is, in looking over the position statement, that's what really piqued my interest at first. And then I dug a little deeper and I reviewed your master plan and some of the goals and projects that you were working on. And I really felt that my strengths really aligned with that. My strengths in finance and housing and economic development and municipal buildings and infrastructure. I had the great opportunity to build a couple of buildings and doing another one. And really the ability to collaborate with town boards and residents. In addition, like I said, growing up in Medford, Winchester's always a community that would have loved to move here, but couldn't do that. And it's just a beautiful community. The downtown is just gorgeous, picturesque. And looking over some of your plans, I remember when it used to flood out way back when. So, but it just would be an honor to be our next town manager.
So it's for a community to be successful, it needs a vision. So how would you work on understanding that vision and, setting a path for implementation of it?
What we did, in my experience and what I did in Littleton this year, is we really worked on goals. We did them two-phase. So we worked on departments preparing their goals and really presenting them to the select board before the select board set their goals. Because ultimately you want all the goals to align so we know what we're working towards. Also, Littleton has gone through, over the several years, a lot of planning, with its master plan and its center revitalization plan and housing production plans and so forth. So that really helps drive the roadmap to where the community has already identified where they want to go. So it's our responsibility and our team to get that community and work together with the boards and the committees, the select board, to really achieve what's been set in the vision.
Anthony, you mentioned, historically growing up in Medford, you knew Winchester and its flooding. One of the greatest accomplishments I think we've had in this town is, the flood mitigation plan that was implemented. It took about 20 years. So our veteran board members were instrumental in that, in putting that together. Is there some experience that you've had in your role as, in town government where you can point to a project like that was so extensive but so important, and your role in it and how it worked out?
Sure. So a lot of plans do take quite a long time. And Littleton, they've been working on they don't have sewer. And they've been working on their sewer for 20-plus years. And that's something where when I jumped aboard with them almost 6 years ago, I think, I got the opportunity to work on that. And we were bringing that vision to reality. We ran into a roadblock that, when you're building a sewer system from scratch, it's a $25–30 million. And ultimately, you want the users to pay for a system like that. So one of our obstacles is finding a partner with that. So we didn't give up. It takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of planning. But we were able to, with IBM moving out of Littleton Center, that was the North American headquarters for IBM, was in Littleton on 42 acres right in the heart of Littleton Common. And I was able to work with the development to have him partner with that. And in return, he's redeveloping that parcel into a mixed use. And he's actually going to be paying 80% of that sewer cost. So that project finally, when I first got back to Littleton, finally we got that through the finish line and got that passed. We got zoning passed at town meeting to support the project at 550 King Street, as well as a unanimous vote at town meeting, which almost never happens, to support the sewer funding, now that we knew that we had a partner that was going to be footing 80% of the bill. So long projects we've worked on, and you just never give up.
So the board is in consensus that, leadership skills are critical, for this position in this hire, particularly where communities have been facing issues that are divisive. So what would you bring to the table, and how would you approach this issue going forward?
The project that I just mentioned too, as well as it was identified that was an area to be redeveloped, you always have a group that doesn't want to change the community and wants to keep its traditions and values and so forth. So really, it's working with both sides to let them realize how we can get there and still keep the characteristics of the community. So part of doing that, we changed our zoning to do form-based code, which allowed us to keep that characteristics and really help to define the vision of what that would look like instead of the normal zoning that would be brick buildings and so forth and not very attractive. The community wanted that. So, we took that piece, we took the economic development piece, we showed them the vision, not to mention we showed them the financial impact. When you have your largest business leave town, that was assessed at $65 million. They left, that assessment dropped to $38 million, which meant that there was a $900,000 difference that we needed to make up on taxes, which, we explained that to the residents. By doing all this, we have to now shift that tax burden over to the resident. So each household got about a $140 increase in tax bill. But by showing them what we were in jeopardy of even more going down if we had empty buildings and what the impact was going to be to the taxpayer, it really came together quite nicely.
So given the size, location, demographics of Winchester, what would you consider to be some of the key issues here? And how would you, go about developing strategies to address those?
So, looking, I think one of the bigger issues too is housing. You know, I'm fortunate in Littleton that where SHI is at 12.9%, and I don't know if you're quite 2% yet. So, and that's a problem, right? We vision, even at 12.9%, that's something that we're continuously working at, because we still can't provide housing, workforce housing. We can't have our teachers live in town. They can't afford it. We can't have our firefighters and our police. So we're really trying to work towards workforce housing, and the project that I mentioned earlier is going to add roughly 780 units, which we hope that will be affordable so they can live in town. Believe that you're working on your affordable, your housing production plan, or I was reading that. So, you know, that's a good start in getting the community to realize some of those challenges. You're also an MBTA community too, so that 750 housing comes into play. You know, we're fortunate with, between the development I talked about and another development that we're working on towards our commuter rail station, because you have to have 20% of that 750 at the commuter rail station. So, and it's really controversial because it was a big open space, and when you're out in the Metro West area, they really love their open space. And we have a lot of chapter land, and they don't want to change that. And they have that right, the community, and we really try to respect that. So now that we have that, with majority of the units going at the 550 King Street location, we now are able to shrink that down to just 150 units, because that's what we'd have to produce to be in compliance with that MBTA communities. And, you know, we've been very successful in getting grants. So we don't want to jeopardize that. We were the recipients of a $1.5 million MassWorks grant, as well as we received an $8 million earmark in that economic development bill. Then I know Winchester got $500,000, but because of our partnership with that development, and obviously the relationships that he has with the governors, we were able to get a nice chunk of dough that's really going to end up helping to offset the cost of that sewer system. So.
Winchester has a strong pool, strong depth of volunteers and board members across the board. How do you build trust so that there's a solid relationship between the staff and these people?
You know, when we have functions as a team in town hall, you know, I like to invite our select board. You know, some people are a little bit maybe standoffish, and they see the select board as the principal, right? Like you're in school. But, you know, I really try to ingrain the board in with the staff, right? To work together, because we have to obviously go towards that vision and the goals that are set forth. And even with the other boards, you know, sometimes you have boards that cross lanes, and it happens sometimes with the planning board, where the planning board has business and the select board sometimes wants to get in the planning boards, and really letting everybody realize that everybody has a purpose, and, you know, respect what the planning board might be doing, respect what the select board doing, work together, because ultimately when you have to go to town meeting and you really want something to pass, you need everybody working together. So, you know, I work extremely hard with all the boards in attending as many meetings as I can, to my wife's displeasure, of course, because she doesn't see me Monday through Thursday anyways. She sees me Friday night. But it helps, you know, because we've been able to get a tremendous amount done in Littleton in 2 years that it wouldn't have got done unless I did the legwork in bringing people together. Because that really, you know, I have a phrase in town, and I always say it wherever I go and board: stronger together. You know, if we work together, there's nothing we can't achieve. And sometimes it's just we stray, and then we just have to corral everybody back and be stronger together.
Obviously, you have a strong finance background. You know, look at your resume. You spent a lot of years into the details. So coming into Winchester, how would you immerse yourself in Winchester's finances and the budget process from this position?
So, you know, my budgeting approach, I'm very conservative with our revenue estimates. operational-wise, based on those revenue estimates, we put together a financial forecast and really outlined to the board, this is where we expect to be if we, for instance, on our financial forecast, we allocated 5% for the schools and 4.5% for the town. The budget came in at 7.9% for the schools, or the request came in at 7.9% for the schools and 8.88% for the town. So that deficit that we already were projecting, structural deficit, now just jumped to $1.7 million. So what I'm going to do in town, and this is the same approach that I would bring here to Winchester, is I've met with the departments individually, and I expect to produce a balanced budget, or close to a balanced budget as I can, for the select board and the finance committee. And ultimately, you know, it's working together. So I met with the superintendent, and, you know, and he showed him what we were faced with and what could we do, and we brought that 7.9 down to 6. On the town side, we're bringing that down as well. It's still probably not going to close that gap, but then some of the more difficult decisions are made, and maybe some concessions that will be made. And that's the operating budget. On the capital budget, again, the request came in at $8.9 million, and we have $1.7 million to spend. So how do we do that? First of all, when I do capital budgeting, I changed it from a 5-year to a 10-year. Even though we only show 5, I wanted our department heads to look out for the future, because we have to know what's coming up. You know, you can't throw to the town that, you know, we need a fire truck in 2 years. You know, we should be planning for that well in advance. And we do. And I send back the capital plan, and I ask for that supporting documentation on what's your inventory replacement. I give priority to projects, capital projects that are actually going to reduce operating revenue. So for instance, our DPW, I had asked him to look at wells. Instead of using potable water to water the grass, and we spent a ton of money last year with the dry summer that we had. We're going to build our own wells, have our own wells, and do our own watering through the wells, and that's going to save us some money. The payback is roughly 7 years, so that was something that I moved ahead on the capital plan, because anything that's going to take some of the relief off of the operating budget should get that priority, because that's where our challenges are, right? We can grow our budgets by Proposition 2.5, local receipts, state aid, and, you know, at least with my experiences in those areas, our local receipts were a little bit down, and it would be, perhaps Winchester is too, in the area of motor vehicle excises, building permits. Those have kind of, we saw an uptick in those during COVID, but now you're seeing the same number of permits, but the permits are really for small projects. Those permits contribute to new growth. So that's the approach that I took to budgeting in Littleton, and it's worked. We too have a AAA bond rating. We don't ever want to jeopardize that AAA bond rating. We work really hard at that, and everybody realizes that. So, you know, I expect us to come together. It's going to be a long budget process, and there's going to be some discussions, and departments should advocate for themselves. I have no problem with that. They're doing their job. Unfortunately, we just can't fund all the requests, right? And I'm sure Winchester's probably faced with some of those same challenges.
I'm just going to ask, what is your experience with bond rating companies? You mentioned the AAA rating. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit?
So we have, we're AAA by Standard & Poor. So we've had a few different bond ratings called in my time, because we had some projects. We just built a new library. We built a new fire station. We built a synthetic football field, stadium. So, you know, every time that we have that ratings call, that's something that we always make sure that we're going to get that AAA.
Are those projects excluded, or are
No,
they
they
part?
weren't. They were within the levy.
Okay.
And we're going to be building a senior center, and we're fortunate to be able to fund that within the levy too.
So you've been around for recessions, and let's say it hits. How do you reset the priorities? Because the town has priorities, the board has priorities, the department has priorities. How do you reset that to balance the budget?
First of all, the budget process, that we're kind of resetting how we do things now. While I was there before as the assistant, it was really the then finance director who was driving the budget process. Although the town bylaws called for the town administrator to be involved, the former town administrator wasn't involved. And it was left basically that nobody was really vetting the department's budgets. And, while I appreciate the expertise of our finance committee and select board, it should be there's some guidance from the person that's in the trenches with the team every day, and that's me, the town administrator. So I know, and having experience, especially in public safety, what has to get done, when it has to get done, when it has to get done. So, this whole budget process in Littleton is completely different this year. This is something that they haven't experienced because the former town administrator was there for a long, long time. So it's going well so far. Departments realize it, and haven't had any pushback. Everybody's working together, and everybody recognizes the challenges that we're facing. So it's been pretty successful so far.
What is your budget process in Littleton?
As far as when you say budget process, just
I'm sorry, how do you create the budget? Do you, as a town manager, put together a budget? Does the finance committee do it?
my office will put together the budget with the finance director. So we're going to produce a spending plan or a budget that will then be vetted by the finance committee and the select board to weigh in on what we recommend funding. Certainly, those priorities can change based on if the board sees something else that they want to put ahead, and that's fine. But at that point, it's a matter of if you increase one department, something has to give on the other end, because we have to produce that balanced budget.
Anthony, what is your approach to personnel management, and what do you see are key HR issues or needs in a town such as Winchester?
I truly believe the most important asset a community has is the employees that work for it. And I work really hard to have positive relationships with all our departments and show that they're valued and show that they're important members of our team. The biggest issue that's facing us, and I'm sure it's facing Winchester, is hiring people for municipal government. It's really, really extremely difficult to hire people. And I think that we just adjusted our salaries, and we had a salary study, and it just went to town meeting, and we actually went to the 75th percentile to try to attract people with money, but sometimes money's not just the issue. Municipal government, we put long hours in, so we have to be flexible. Certainly COVID's changed the landscape on how we do business. A lot of people, the first thing they ask is, well, is this a remote job? We're a service-oriented industry. We have to be there for our residents. So while we will give some flexibility with that, it's a job that really requires most of the time be spent inside the building and really helping. So I'm looking at, Ray, things like instituting a tuition reimbursement program, because we can't get I've been looking for a treasurer for about 4 months now, and we have a new assistant treasurer who is extremely bright, fantastic, only has a high school degree, would like to go to college, but she can't afford it. So that tuition reimbursement would allow us to invest in our employees and really succession plan and create that next treasurer from within. So again, it's investing in the employees with professional development and training. And that's what I hear on exit interviews, when I have exit interviews with staff. And I just had our assistant library director, and we have a whole series of questions that we ask, and salary and benefits and all good. And and she said professional development, and she'd like more of an opportunity to be involved in their local, not their local, but their associations, the library association, the auditors, the accountants, treasurers, planning, and I encourage that, because I think that that also helps them network with their peers. So try real hard, but that is the number one issue the challenge that we're faced with right now.
So you mentioned hiring's difficult. Employees are the most valuable resource the town has. So describe your management style in making sure employees feel valued and want to stay, working in your administration.
Sure, Rich. I try to get out of my office as much as I can and walk around and mingle with staff. What I like to do is I'll have a opening day barbecue, hot dogs, and we'll get together at have lunch, and we'll turn the TV on in the community room and celebrate being together. Opening day, have a little fun with that. I'll bring in pizza for DPW when they were working a snowstorm. I sent over 10 pizzas to make them realize that, we appreciate them, and I appreciate them, and I'll do that. This summer, I put on a barbecue where we all got together, and even select board members came, and it was great. It was a great bonding experience. So the staff I have love working for the town, and they don't want to leave. It's getting them there. So once they're there, I really try hard to make sure that they feel like they're part of the family, and they're part of the team, and they're valued. And I don't mind spending some of my own money to do that because, like I said, they're really, without them on the team, there is no team.
Winchester has identified communications within the town government as a very critical issue. How would you develop and devise a communication plan and a strategy to increase communications both internally and with the residents so that they're aware or kept abreast of what's happening in the town's priorities, the town's achievements?
We're facing that same issue right now too. And so what we're looking at is, I hired a PR firm so we can get some more press releases out there and keep the public informed. I also switched our emergency notification system to another system that will allow us to send text messages and send emails and not just the phone calls, but the phone calls, and really keeping them informed. And it doesn't mean you're gonna get every call because we're trying to focus it on what do you want to receive notifications on. So we're just rolling that out. Another thing that we're looking at is we'd love to do, there's no more newspapers, in that part of the state is nothing. Could be a blessing at times, but there is no newspapers. So we talked about doing a newsletter that we can send out. But that's a lot of work, and we don't have a big staff, so we're trying to work through how we can do that. We do a lot of PSAs working with our WinCam, but LCTV. So anytime we have something new that we have going on, we really try to hit the airwaves and talk about that. So we too are going to be hunkering down and seeing what else we can do to keep the citizens engaged, because it's a challenge. And that's one of the things that we hear all the time, right, is I didn't know about that. I didn't know about that. In this new notification system, if we're working on a project on, Washington Street, we can circle just by using your finger, circle Washington Street, and just the abutters would be notified that the select board is going to be talking, or the planning board is going to be talking about this, on such and such a date, and you might be interested. You might have interest to come out for that meeting, or tune in to cable access to stay informed. So. We're trying, with limited staff, we're trying everything we can do, and with a limited budget, we're trying to stay within a budget too.
You mentioned your staff. What's the current makeup of your town manager's office that you're used to working with?
I have an assistant and an executive director, an executive assistant.
How about communications internally amongst departments, amongst staff at all levels?
What I do is meet with department heads every 2 weeks. We have a bi-weekly meeting, and then we bring them all together once a month, and we have just a round table where everybody gets around the table, talks about some of the projects that they might be working on, and that's been super effective because, while it takes, maybe an hour and a half to do that, it's amazing how when somebody's talking, another department will say, well, I can help you with this. And it really just, makes them, again, feel part of that team, and everybody wants to contribute and help. So that's really effective too. And I plan for that in those weekly meetings. So when I come to the monthly meeting, I have an agenda that I want to touch upon and really tap the resources of our team to see how can we achieve this.
How about getting the message to the rest of the staff?
I encourage our department heads to meet with their staff too. And again, I walk around too. I at least a couple times a year, I'll just have, first of all, my door is an open door, and I encourage staff, if they have any questions, want to talk, I'm always available. They have my phone, they can text me, call me, walk in my office. I will always make time for our team. And I encourage our department heads to do the same thing, to meet with their team, keep them informed, keep them feeling, because they're an important part of the organization. Let them realize that, and we value, just like I value our department heads' opinions, I want them to take that same approach with our frontline workers too, because some great ideas come from the lowest levels of our team.
Can you just describe your collective bargaining experience and maybe describe a difficult situation and how you resolved it in collective bargaining?
So I have had the great fortune of negotiating 2 cycles of contracts in Littleton. We have 4 unions, and I've done I've settled all the contracts twice so far. Also, like I mentioned earlier, I sit on the Joint Labor Management Committee, so right now, I'm actually trying to work on another community where they're a part. So I am the management rep, and then the union will have their rep. So we'll talk about the issues, but sometimes just another manager, sometimes when you're ingrained in it, you don't realize how close you could be. And it takes an outsider to say, do you realize that this may only cost you X amount? And it's not, in continuing to not settle is not only, hurt feelings get involved, but also the cost of going to the next level. So really keep that in mind if you have to go to arbitration, what the costs associated with that. So, and we're able to settle some contracts that way, but our unions have been, we recognize the good work they do, and we're able to give them fair raises. The last contracts were a little bit more difficult coming out of COVID because, again, we lost a hotel that was shut down for the most part, and vacancy was very high, so we weren't able to give 2s, but we did a 1, 1.5, 2. The union accepted that because I showed them the financial picture that we're in and what we had available. And they appreciated the honesty and openness from me, and we were able to settle that contract.
Anthony, how do you work to resolve conflict and disputes? And briefly talk about a Littleton example where you had a polarizing issue and how you addressed it and how you may have resolved it or not resolved it.
Some staff might be watching, so I won't say this. I won't say this specific. We had a department where the director and assistant director were at odds, and it was really causing a lot of problems for that department. Our HR director, which I'm sorry, I took your HR director, but she attempted to try to mediate those two, and it didn't work. So we just had a mediation session in my office after everybody left, and we sat down from 5 to 8, and we talked about what the differences were and what each party was upset about the other party. And, you know, by the end of that meeting, you know, they both realized that it was a little bit petty on each side, and, you know, they walked out, they hugged each other, and it's, to this day, you know, it's been working out well for that department. So, you know, recognize that there's a problem and really dealing with it, and just talking. You know, sometimes it's just talking, you know. Communication is the key, and when the communication is there, and that's what it was. It was a breakdown of communication. They really were stopped talking to each other. So bringing them together, it just really was very effective.
So I just want to make sure I understood you correctly. You held a mediation in your office from 5 to 8 o'clock at night for 3 hours with 2 employees that were at each other?
Yeah, they were, you know, there was crying, yelling, and everything, and I was willing to stay as long as it took, as long as we all walked out and we were a team again.
How do you envision a good working relationship between the town manager and the select board, and how would you describe a successful relationship?
You know, I think, again, communication, I think the direction, you know, obviously the board sets goals, or I'd assume that the select board sets goals. And understanding what those goals are, and it makes it easy for me. And then I report back to the board at our meetings, and I give a report on what we've accomplished towards those goals. Quarterly, we'll do catch up, and we'll talk about where we are. You know, some goals are going to be long-term, like the water flooding that takes a long term, but those are goals, and we're still going to leave them on. They're just longer-term goals. Another thing that we do, once the new board is elected, I coordinate a retreat, and I bring in a mediator, which is another former town manager who does a tremendous job doing that, and it really helps the board work together, and we identify some of those areas there where we can be successful in communicating with the town administrator and with the board, and what the board would like to see. So that retreat, we've done it every year that I've been here, and it's very successful in keeping us as a team on the same page too. You know, and obviously communication, you know, it's every select board member has my cell phone and email, and they'll reach out, you know, and I'm always available to answer questions and give guidance, especially before a meeting. Sometimes there might be something on the agenda and in your packet that maybe you might be a little unsure about or have questions. I always encourage, and I try to get that packet out, you know, at least 4 days in advance of the meeting. So if you do have questions, call me up, you know, and let's try to see how I can get some of the answers to your questions in advance of that meeting to be more productive and to move things forward.
I think we're at that point, Mr. Chair, if I want, you know, turn it over to your members to see if you have questions and see how far that goes, and then we can finish up.
Sure. Does anyone have questions?
Yeah, cool.
Good.
What's your approach to managing change? So if there's COVID and that's sort of unexpected, and you know, need an approach to managing that, or if you're bringing in sort of a new initiative and you know, trying to lead with something positive, how do you approach change within your organization?
So COVID was a great example too of how we needed to pivot, because, you know, that's something that there was no textbook that told us how to deal with a pandemic. And I had to look at it from 2 points of view during that pandemic, from the early stages on when I was in Wenham when it first broke out, and continuing on to when I got to Littleton, it was all about vaccinations. And, you know, I quickly pivoted, and I was fortunate to have the Mass Department of Public Health's Vax Bus in Littleton 5 times, and we were one of the first communities. I think Arlington beat us only by a day to vaccinate. Once they announced the children's 5 through 11 could be vaccinated, They announced that on Friday, and I already had a clinic set up, staffed. The Vax bus came out too on that Monday, and we vaccinated almost half of the children on that one night. So, change is something that people, there's always a hesitance to change. And I must have heard 1,000 times, we've always done it that way. But COVID shows us that we can't always do it that way. We need to adjust and pivot and work towards what the issues that are facing us. So we did. As a team, we were able to still meet all the needs and challenges in working with our residents throughout that. And staff did a tremendous job, working from homes. We set everybody up remotely. And while I never want to do that again, it was very effective. And everybody really adapted to what we were faced with. And even now, I'm still working on as far as we need to do more online transactions, because that's what COVID showed us. And then what I mentioned about the difficulty in hiring people and having that ability to do some kind of remote work at times. But we still, the number one, we still have to produce, and give customer service, A1 customer service. And that's our goal, and that's our mission, and that's what we live by in Littleton, and everybody has bought into that. And it wasn't something that they did, and it's something that I have to coach sometimes. Somebody might call the DPW, and maybe an executive assistant gets it. The resident's not really happy. They'll call my office. We'll circle back, and at the end, that resident's very happy at the way that was dealt with.
Other questions from members? Anyone?
I'll do one more.
So dealing with, let's just, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, well,
You go first, and then I'll go.
I didn't hear that there was another one.
Yeah,
Sorry.
If these go on, then I can ask a couple too. So go ahead.
So the other question I have is, if you're appointed in Winchester, what would at the end of your first year you would say were your sort of top 3 accomplishments?
First of all, we would sit down and see what your goals are, and my accomplishment is going to be what the board is in the community is looking to achieve. So you've probably already identified those, and at the first year, and Littleton did, and I've wrapped up my second year, and we've, on LinkedIn, I had another town manager say, congratulations, your work anniversary. So you got 10 years of work done in 2 years. I am extremely dedicated and competitive, and I don't like to be number 2. I like to be number 1. And with that, and just, our budget, since I've been back, we received twice the GFOA Distinguished Budget Award. Our annual report went from just a regular exercise to receiving the award 3 out of the 4 years. The only year we didn't get it is because of COVID. I think, actually, John, you may have been a judge on one of those years. But anything, it's a reflection. Anything that we're doing is a reflection on the community, and I always want the community to come out and be the best.
In the next couple months in this town, we're going to have to fill some key positions. We got a DPW director retiring, fire chief retiring, things like that. A town planner we need to hire. Big positions for a lean government like ourselves. How do you approach hiring, and what qualities do you look for in filling a management position such as those?
Rich, I've dealt with that. When I came back to Littleton, I had 4 key department heads, including just what you said, DPW, fire, finance director. What I did is I'm very involved in the associations, and I like to network. So I like to go out and try to get applicants, good applicants that I know are good applicants from other communities, and try to convince them that there's a great opportunity here. For public safety, what we did on that one, I've had to do a police chief and a fire chief in my time in Littleton, and we formed the screening committee. We did an assessment center. Worked out well. We ended up right now with 2 fantastic chiefs through that process. Like I said, the finance director, kind of stole the one from Medford. You know, the HR director, I fortunate that your HR director moved out our section of the state, so it was just more convenient for her. So that was just kind of a luck on our part. But, you know, I really try to get out there and network and find out what the best talent is out there. And ultimately, it has to be a fit. You know, it has to be a fit with our team. Because that's really, as long as they have the skill set and the background, they fit in, we're gonna do some great things together.
Right now, we currently have one IT director in this town, and I think IT is something that's important for every municipality, especially if you're talking about communications, and you've mentioned some stuff you've done in Littleton. How would you approach our IT department, and what would you do, you know, in the first year if you were?
So we too had one IT person, and it was a challenge, and she was running around like a chicken with her head cut off. But there were certain initiatives that I wanted to get accomplished. I wanted our phone system that was kind of antiquated, updated, so it's a VoIP phone system. We instituted electronic records management, and I know that's something that was identified in your master plan for Winchester. We just rolled that out, which really makes retrieving documents really easy and quick. What also I'm looking at is, and I just had a conversation with the superintendent because our person is going to probably retire in 2-3 years, and I talked to him about, is there an opportunity that we could combine our IT and have a townwide IT, perhaps do a study using the Collins Center and evaluate both systems and get their opinion and their recommendations too. Because you're right, IT is, we spend a lot of money. We're doing, what's it called, two-factor authentication on our systems, so we don't have hackers come in. We do testing. It's all done with a small staff, but I'm really concerned because I'm not sure that what we're paying her, we're going to be able to find the next IT person. And that's why I wanted to work with the schools, because if we did that, perhaps together we could spend a little bit more maintaining the same budget and being more effective together.
Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks, Anthony. Just a question to kind of follow up there. What's your relationship with the superintendent of schools, and how does that work as far as budgeting? And, you know, at the municipal level, it's often the town and the schools are kind of siloed, and but, you know, as you just gave an example, it's important for efficiencies in the community to communicate well.
I have a tremendous relationship. I'm very fortunate with the superintendent, and we sit down all the time and talk about some of the challenges that he's faced with the schools, with special ed costs and busing costs, and right now we're trying to go to a later start time at the high school, and, you know, with that comes another additional cost for more bus routes. You know, we sit down and we talk about and try to understand what he's facing, but what we have. We've been able to work together. Just like when I started, his original request was 7.4. After we sat down and talked, I have him back down to 6%. I'm not sure that that's going to get there, but I think that if I go back to the superintendent, I think that he's willing to work with us because he knows, you know, he knows the restrictions that we have, and we can only grow our budget by so much. And, you know, having that relationship has been very, very, very successful for me in working with him. And, you know, even in Wenham, I had another great relationship with the superintendent there. I think it's really important that the town manager and the superintendent work in tandem. You know, we don't want this, and you're right, there's always, you know, the schools get this, the schools get that, and the town gets, you know, we're a team. You know, again, stronger together, we're a team. And that's the approach that I try to take, and he tries to take, and we're successful. So far.
Other questions? Anyone?
Okay. Everybody's good?
I think we're good.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
So, Anthony, opportunity for a closing statement to the board.
Sure. You know, I just want to, first of all, thank you all for allowing me to be here. you know, I do look at this community as this is one of the premier jobs I consider in the state. Winchester is well-respected, has always been well-managed. You know, I spoke to your former town manager, Rich Howard, and my former mayor, and, you know, talked to him about this opportunity before tonight, and he had nothing but good things to say. And I wasn't surprised with that. And it's a great community. I'd love to dive in and help you with some of the issues that you're facing and some of the financial. I know that, you know, the override could be pending for an operating override, and I think I can add value. I really think that I can add value in my work ethic, and I feel like I'm really successful in bringing the team together, not only internally, but the citizens and the boards. I'd love to have that opportunity with you, and that you won't be regret if that does happen.
Okay. Great, thank you for being here this evening. Thank you
Thank you.
for coming into Winchester and being a candidate for
Thank
the
you.
position. And we'll be talking as we move forward with this process.
All right, excellent, thank you.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
So the time right now is 8:10, or a little less than that. Why don't we see if Beth,
She's here.
if
so
she's
we
here, I
can-
believe, so
yeah,
maybe 8:20,
That's fine.
we'll resume again? That's okay with everyone? Thank you. Stand. Back. We have one more candidate to get through tonight. No stranger to anybody watching at home or at this table. But Beth, the format tonight will be, we have about 45 minutes of set questions that John and Ray will ask. Board members can jump in at any point.
Sure.
To ask any questions or follow-up questions that they have, and then you'll save the last 15 minutes or so for board members to ask any questions that they have. So,
Great. Sounds good.
with that, I'll turn it over to John. So, thanks, John. Go ahead.
Sure. Feels kind of weird welcoming you here since
Yeah,
I'm sitting in the chair you've occupied for a few months, so maybe you should welcome me. But, welcome and congratulations.
Thank you.
On
Thank
being
you.
one of the 3 finalists here for the Winchester Town Manager position. And and I'm sure the audience knows you've been serving that position as an interim position,
Sure.
for some time now. So why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about your background,
Sure.
In municipal government, and why you're interested in this position at this point.
Yeah, sure, that makes sense. As all of you know, I'm Beth Rudolph. I've worked with the town since 2004. My educational background is in engineering, so I have an undergraduate degree from Tufts University in civil engineering. I worked for several years in the consulting world. I went back and got my master's degree, also from Tufts, water resources engineering, so my concentration was more of the water resources world, which fit very well. It fits very well as my role in town engineer here in Winchester. And I worked for several years in consulting after I got my master's degree. And I found myself, in the consulting world, you come in the middle of a project, right? You're hired by a municipality, or I worked for several projects for the federal government. And what I really missed was that seeing a project through from start to finish, right? You identify the problem, you problem solve to figure out how you can solve that problem, and then you ultimately see the fruit of your labor of that work, right? And so at some point, I decided that I wanted to make that move. I was working with a lot of municipalities, and I wanted to make that move into municipal government. And so I was very lucky to be hired here as the assistant town engineer in 2004, and then I became the town engineer in 2010, and I've served in that role. I've served in that role since then. 2012, not 2010. I've served in the role as a town engineer since then. And then last year, I was very, pleased to be appointed by the board as the acting town manager. I've very much enjoyed the past year working with the board and working with the town in that role. My interest, as town engineer, I've been part of a lot of different projects over the years, and one of the things that I've really enjoyed about Winchester, when I first started here as the assistant town engineer, there was no town planner position, so it was actually above our door was engineering/planning, right? And so in many towns it's engineering and DPW, and in this town I think it took a different role that I really enjoyed in terms of how the engineering was encompassing kind of a holistic approach, right? Not just looking at the infrastructure, but looking at how we as a community function and how engineering fits into that. And so I think that the role that moving into the acting town manager role has given me the opportunity to kind of expand that even further, right? And to look at the big picture, how we as a town function, how we can do better to serve our residents, how we can engage our residents, how we can understand the concerns that they have, how we can then propel those concerns and desires and values of our community into action through our budget, through our capital planning process, through our social initiatives and so forth. So that's one of the reasons I want to take this step into the leadership role. Also, I've been very privileged to work with a dedicated group of staff that we have here in Winchester, and I think it's just a phenomenal group of people, professional group of people, and so I'm excited to work in a leadership role with the department heads and the staff that we have here in town. And just the other thing I want to mention that I am a resident of Winchester. I moved here when my youngest son started kindergarten, so I have 2 kids who've gone through the school system. I have a sophomore in high school and a 7th grader right now. I'm a Morocco School parent alumni. My kids have been on the playgrounds here in Winchester. I've been on the soccer fields. I know the town. I know our strengths. I know our weaknesses. And so I think that makes me have a different understanding from a leadership role as being a resident. So,
Beth, you just mentioned strengths and weaknesses. What do you envision being here for so long and being ingrained in the community? What are our strengths and what are our weaknesses?
what are Winchester's strengths and weaknesses?
Not yours.
Yeah. So I think the biggest strength of our community is the engagement of our population, right? We have an incredibly educated and engaged community who are interested in town issues and who bring tremendous benefit to our community in terms of how the ideas that are brought forward. I think that's one of the greatest strengths of our community. Working with those groups, I've had great relations working with the boards and committees, and then just regular folks over the years who've been interested in projects, and the things that they've brought to the table have improved projects every step of the way. So I think that's been one of our greatest strengths. I think our weakness, and I wouldn't catch it as a weakness, but it is a challenge, is that we are 95% residential. We have a limited commercial tax base, and we as a town are facing some serious, we're kind of at a crossroads here in terms of how we're going to go forward in the next few years. We came off of an override in 2019 that lasted us 3 years, and starting with the FY23 budget, we saw a structural deficit between our revenues and our operating expenses, and so that in the model that we developed at the end of as part of our FY23 budget planning process, that is projected to grow over the next 3 years, and so we really need to at this point have some serious conversations about where we want to grow and move as a community, given those financial constraints, and given the we all just came off of town meeting where we heard a lot of feedback from our capital planning committee about the needs of our town from a capital perspective, and we need to to really sit down and put our heads together and figure out a plan how we're going to take the next step to address those capital needs. I know we've talked many times about the success that we've had, and one of the board's highest priorities for the past 20 plus years has been the town's flood mitigation program, and that was a project that we laid out, and we developed a set of projects, and we committed to funding those projects every step of the way, and it's been long and it's been hard, and I think one of the things that I bring as a leader is that persistence, right? So we can't shy away from things because it's a difficult conversation, or it's a difficult project, or it's difficult to engage the community. I've had those projects through the years where they don't just take months or years, they take decades to develop, the Tri-Community Bikeway being one of them. The MBTA project, took us 12 years of conversations to get to the point we are today with the MBTA reconstructing our station downtown. So I think that's one of the things that I bring as a leader, is that kind of persistence in terms of understanding those problems and not shying away from those hard conversations.
So you've been here as in a department level, and now as an acting manager,
Yes.
which is going to be, being the permanent manager is going to be a different role.
Absolutely, yes.
Because you have a different set of responsibilities.
Sure.
So how would
And I won't have two jobs.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you're still doing, bless. But, coming in, so how do you now, as the manager, understand the vision of the town? Vision is so important.
Absolutely.
How do you come in and reposition yourself, understanding the vision of the town, through the board's eyes, through town eyes?
Yeah, so I think, I come with the benefit of being here for a long time, but I don't want that to cloud my vision, right, in terms of things that we can do to improve efficiencies or make changes in town government and make changes in the way we've done things. I think I understand how things work, and I probably have some ideas myself of where we could do things better. But I think it's important to come in with a fresh set of eyes, really, as a manager, even though I've been here for so long, and have some conversations with people to say, hey, let's take a step back with the board, with other boards and committees, with department heads, with staff, to say, this is how we've done it for many years. What are the things that we can do better? And I think so one of the things that I've worked on with the board since I've been here the past year is developing a work plan. So we've put together quarterly, we review the board's work plan in terms of what the goals and objectives are for the board and the projects that we're working on to meet those goals and objectives. And I think that's an important process to continue and to really to dive into that so that we're making sure that staff and is understanding what our policy directives are from the board, and that we are moving forward to meet those objectives and make progress on those goals. And the biggest piece of it goes without saying is creating an open community dialogue on a lot of these issues, right? I think we've done a lot of work. The planning board has put a lot of work into a master plan. I think there's some really good overarching themes that we see in that master plan in terms of how we as a community want to develop. And I think there's a couple other things we're doing. Right now we're doing a transportation master plan that I've been working on for the past year or so, where we've been able to go out into the community. I think it's probably one of the best responded to surveys that we've done in the community. That traffic always brings a lot of comments from residents, but I think we did a good job of also getting it out there. We were able to utilize not just town resources to advertise that we were collecting this information, but we were able to go through the schools network, which reaches a much broader audience than a lot of our kind of email distribution lists do. So I think that was a good way to kind of collaborate in expanding our communication potential. So I think that's a good example of ways that we've kind of tried to bring the community input into that visioning.
Okay. Leadership is going to be very important in this position that's been determined by this board. And I've known there's a lot of examples out there of people who have stepped up from internal to become, the #1 position within a town organization like this. What skills are you going to bring to make you effective, being the leader of this community? And how are you going to step out from being a peer to being the leader?
Sure. So I think the first thing is the relationships that I already have and that I've built with staff, with residents, with boards and committees. And I think that is critical, right? People, I think I'm approachable, and I very much have an open door policy, and I want people to feel that they can come to me with concerns or ideas and feel supported. I think it's, I've kind of taken that first step over this past year, right, in being the acting role and finding ways to differentiate myself, not just as a department head anymore, but as a leader in the town. And, presentations to town meeting, memos to town meeting members, presentations within the community. So being more of a face than I have been in the past, just as a department head. And on the department, staffing side, I lead monthly department head meetings, and we have a very kind of collaborative approach in terms of how we work with staff. I have a series of other meetings beyond the monthly department head meetings with staff about various project initiatives that are going on. We have a monthly capital meeting where we, work with folks from engineering. Our new sustainability director, who was brought on board last October, shortly after I came on as acting town manager, our DPW, and so we have a collaborative approach there where we, already have an established practice in terms of meeting, and so it's just, in a leadership role, it's about facilitating those conversations, right? It's about being part of the conversation and making sure that everybody who should be there has a seat at the table.
So Beth, you've had the opportunity to work under 2 or 3 town managers, and so you can sort of, like we all do, look at what they do best.
Sure.
And when you go down that list of things they do best, what things would you like to incorporate into your management style?
Yeah, so I think the biggest one, or one of the biggest ones for me, is responsiveness. So I think it's important that that department heads and staff know that they can come to me and that I will be responsive to their concern, that if they send me an email, they're not going to wait, 2 weeks to hear back from me, or maybe never hear back from me. And I'm not saying I'm perfect, right? I think everybody gets 50 million emails a day. So, but that responsive, I think, is important to to developing a relationship and making people feel supported and heard, and feel like they can come to you with issues or concerns. So I think that's number one. In the wider community, I think it's about communication and transparency and accountability, right? I think those are kind of the big ones, and those are things I've tried to incorporate over the past year, and certainly would like to do more on all fronts.
Great,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you.
So you mentioned the volunteerism level and the fact a lot of people are involved here. How are you going to build upon that? You know, because a lot of communities are having trouble keeping, you know, volunteers involved. How do you build
I don't think we
upon
have that problem here in Winchester. I think we have, we're very lucky in that respect. We do have a lot of people who are very interested in volunteering. There are obviously some boards and committees that are harder to get volunteers for than others, but you know, the board appointed the Board of Assessors had an interim vacancy for 3 months, and we had 2 applicants for that position the other night. So there is certainly an interest in volunteerism. But I think that the communication piece from the town manager's office is important to those boards and committees, and letting them know that we are a resource for them, and that we're here to engage with them and to, you know, to facilitate conversations as necessary between those boards, committees, and the select board. And the town manager's role is kind of the piece in the middle that kind of brings all that together.
Okay.
Beth, you mentioned difficult conversations. Assuming, you know, as acting town manager or just in your career, you've had to have difficult conversation. What skill set and what do you rely on in having those conversations, and what's your approach to those types
So
of
I think
confrontations?
I would look at it in two pieces, right? One is the kind of the personnel side, right? So I think, you know, if there's a conflict, right, between staff or departments, I think it's important that as a manager, I let them know that I trust them to work through an issue first, right? That I don't want to step in. I'm not looking to kind of be in the middle of something. But if they can't resolve it on their own, I think that the next step would be for me to bring each party in individually to understand the issue, and then to have a meeting to bring them together and to act more as a mediator. I'm not there to, you know, to dictate a solution. It's more about a conversation and making sure everybody feels heard in the situation, and then, you know, trying to come to a resolution. In some cases, you know, as issues escalate, there's obviously the possibility of having labor council involved. So that's a much kind of much further step down the line than I think we need to in most cases. But the difficult conversation is about being straightforward and being honest, but being empathetic, right? So you don't do anybody a service if you're not honest in terms of feedback to people, right? People in a professional setting get better at their jobs by hearing constructive feedback on their job, and I think it's part of management's job to have those open and honest conversations, and you know, to set goals and to work with people, not just like at their annual review, but all steps along the way to work with them on developing them, you know, their professional goals in their department, and if there are an issue, to have those honest conversations with people. And I think that's an important part of being a leader and having those difficult conversations. On the resident side or outside perspective, you know, I've had many projects over the years where we've had lots of difficult conversations about things, right? We do lots of things that are disruptive to people, or maybe not what they'd like to see in their neighborhood, and we've had those conversations. We've had them, you know, either over a matter of weeks or over a matter of years. You know, I point to the Tri-Community Bikeway project as something that project that started in the 1990s, and we had 3 communities that were coming together. We had a project that, you know, was impacting people's, you know, in front of people's houses or behind people's houses, and there was a lot of work that we did working with those residents to understand their concerns and to try to alleviate their concerns where we could. So those are, you know, every step of the way, there's hard conversations in town government, I think.
So just to pursue on that a little bit, let's say you've got a senior department head, been here a long time, and doesn't quite accept you in the role as town manager and is almost disrespecting in ways behind the scenes. How do you address that?
Yeah, so I think, you know, it's a process, right? It's a conversation, and I think it's it's setting expectations, and it's part of the review process that we have. We have an annual review process where we have a form, a multi-page form that we fill out, and setting expectations. And, I'm very straightforward, and if I think, there's a problem or there's a concern, I will sit down with somebody and have a conversation about, how we can address it and how we can resolve whatever that concern is.
Finances, so, you were an engineer, and
Yes.
for trivia, many original town managers were engineers back when it started in the 50s and 60s. So coming in, you've immersed yourself in the finance process in the last year.
I have,
So what has been your role, and what do you see your role moving forward on the finance side?
Sure. So just as town engineer, I've obviously developed a department budget for years. I've also developed our capital plan, right? So engineering has various projects that we put forward to our capital planning committee, and then we work very collaboratively with our DPW in terms of developing a plan for transportation projects, water, sewer infrastructure, drainage infrastructure, and other projects. So I have that experience as town engineer for many years. In the past year, I've obviously gained a lot of experience putting together a whole town budget, right? So last year when I came on board, we started the FY23 budget development process, and we're just in the process of starting the FY24 budget development process right now. And so, last year I went through the entire process, put forth the town manager's financial plan that was due February 15th. We also put forward a 3-year plan as part of that. It was really a collaboration between myself, the assistant town manager, and our comptroller, putting those kind of that 3-year projection together, and obviously working collaboratively with the department heads. So we are in the beginning stages of putting together our FY24 plan. We just had all of our departments submit their budgets, and myself and the assistant town manager are meeting this week and next week with each of our department heads to go through their budgets and understand their requests. We ask departments to put a level service budget together, but to also factor in, or not factor into their budget, but also give us a list of would like to have, things that they would like to see beyond their level service budget, and so that we have those to consider what our department's requests are. We're obviously headed into a challenging budget cycle, so it's going to be hard to fulfill a lot of those, but I think it's important for management to understand that those areas where department heads feel like they could use some more resources, and that's something that we can convey to the select board and to finance committee and other people to understand that need.
So bond ratings have been a discussion here.
Yes, yeah.
So what steps have you taken to, become more familiar with the bond rating process and
Sure.
to protect it?
Yeah, so I've always, even as town engineer, been kind of on the periphery of that as we've funded capital projects over the years. We've used various short-term and long-term borrowing to fund those projects, and so I've not been directly related as town engineer, but have been on the kind of the outside of that circle. In the past year, obviously, I've taken a more active role and leadership role in that. We all had a rating call earlier in 22 at the beginning of the year when we had some bonds going to market that we had a rating call with Moody's then, where we did reestablish our AAA rating. We did just, as everybody knows, we did just receive notification from Moody's that our rating is under review. So we had kind of an initial call with our Moody's representative a couple weeks ago, or actually last week, to kind of understand some of their concerns, and we have our rating call scheduled for January. And in the meantime, we have a financial firm, Hilltop Securities, that we work with that I've gotten much more familiar with over the past year, working with them and understanding. Moody's has changed their metrics, and so as it's been described to us several times over the past few weeks, it's not Winchester that's changed, it's Moody's that's changed. And so understanding the changes that Moody's has made and understanding how Winchester now plays into those metrics that they're evaluating, and how we compare to our peer communities that are currently AAA Moody's communities. So we're diving into that right now.
Beth, how would you describe the learning curve in the last year in terms of the financial aspects of the job.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you were to get the leadership position, what, if anything, would you do to continue that learning?
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously, I'd never put a full town budget together before. As town manager, that wasn't my job. I put my department budget together. I obviously understood the budget process. I understood the town manager's role in that. But I was not before last year the one in the ditches putting that together. So I think, you know, from my perspective, that it was obviously a huge learning experience, and I think every year is a learning experience with a budget, right? Because every year facing different challenges and different requests and different needs and different desires. So I would look to additional professional development opportunities for myself in the finance position, right? Because obviously that's something that, you know, I don't come from a finance background, so that's something I would continue to do kind of offline for myself. But I think experience is the best teacher in a lot of ways, and so this, you know, continuing to work through the process, through developing our budget, I think is really the key.
Beth, what's your approach to personnel management, and what do you see as key HR issues or needs for Winchester?
Sure. So I think the most important piece is to make sure that our staff feel supported and heard. They feel like they can come to management with concerns, and they feel like we are responsive and that we have an open door policy in terms of having those conversations, and they could be difficult conversations, right? I don't want people to feel like we have to shy away from having difficult conversations, because those are just as important as the, hey, you're doing a great job conversation. I think recognizing our employees and recognizing the work that they do is critical. There's so much that happens in the town on a daily basis, and making sure that the efforts that our staff is putting forward, if it's, you know, a new grant that we received, or a new initiative that we took, or a promotion, or somebody that's been here, you know, for 35 years. We have a lot of long-time employees in town. I think that's critical to building morale and to building the culture that we want to have here, which is, you know, town government is very much a customer service driven job, right? And customer service comes across best when you have employees who feel like they're happy to be here, and that they feel supported by the people that they work for, and they feel engaged in the community. I think ensuring that we have adequate opportunity for professional development. You know, a municipal government is a very interesting organizational structure, because you have people who have every skill set, right, in a very small building, right? Each department does something completely different, but we all have to work together. And so making sure that each individual department feels like they have the autonomy to go out and to do those professional development activities that they feel like they need to, right? And we have that we support them to do that. I think that's critical. And then there's the other stuff, right, that builds a community and a culture within your staff, which is, you know, how you interact, how you say hi in the hallway, you have a conversation here, you have a conversation there. Before COVID, we had a really nice kind of like, we work till 7 on Monday, so we used to have a really nice little like potluck once a month on Monday afternoons at 4 o'clock, just to, you know, give everybody a break from a long Monday. Obviously that kind of went by the wayside as we were, you know, not all here together, but I think that's the type of thing to bring back, to build that community within our staff. Our HR department has done a lot with our transition to Maya. We transitioned to a new healthcare program this current fiscal year, and Maya has a great wealth of programs, wellness programs, other programs. We have on-site yoga class after work. So there's a lot of those kind of HR opportunities as well that I think are good for us to roll out for staff.
Do we survey our employees, do we have an employee survey to find out what's important to them? And then
So
we
there
respond?
have been a few of those related to those Maya wellness things, like, you know,
Yeah.
what would you kind of be interested in? But I think that's something, you know, should I be here, that it would be important. Like, what do you feel as a
We
community?
assume things might be important to them, but then we feel like,
Absolutely.
hey, no, that's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
really
no, I
important
think
at all.
that's
Yeah.
that's important point to make, definitely.
Beth, as you know, we have some big positions to fill with
We
some
do.
retirements coming up. What would be your approach to that hiring, and what key qualities would you look for
Yeah.
in filling those positions?
So, as you know, we have our longtime DPW director retiring in January, which is a huge loss. The community's worked here for 40 years. And then we also have our fire chief retiring in April, who has a similarly long tenure. And I think one of the things that you lose when you lose people like that is the institutional knowledge, right? And so that's hard to replace. But in terms of a hiring approach, you know, first and foremost, we want to make sure that the people we hire have the skills to do the job. We, especially in our DPW, have kind of a unique setup with a water treatment plant. We also maintain school buildings. We have the custodians under our DPW. And so it's different than other communities may have. So making sure that we get somebody from a skill set that kind of fits our needs. And then is equally important is getting somebody who fits in with the culture and who can work with other members of the team. It's a very collaborative approach. And just speaking as town engineer, in many departments, engineering is underneath DPW. In Winchester, we're a totally separate department, but we still require just as much coordination to make sure everything, we're working together. So just making sure that we're hiring people who are willing to have that kind of collaborative approach that is critical to making our town government work, I think is important.
You touched upon this briefly in a previous answer, but the town has identified communications within town
Yes.
government as an
Yeah.
area that needs
Yeah.
improvement. How would you devise a communications plan and a strategy to increase both internal communications amongst departments and staff, as well as increase residents' awareness of the town's activities and priorities?
Sure. So that is certainly something we've been talking a lot about over the past year. We have a communications study committee that was created at fall 2021 town meeting and just wrapped up their work and presented at the fall 22 town meeting. And so there's been a lot of conversations over the past year related to that. Since I've been up here in the town manager's office, that's been a priority for us. It starts with us, right? So we have a weekly town manager's newsletter that we push out. I've also tried to create a more kind of collaborative communication with our Chamber of Commerce and making sure that we as a town are publicizing the events that they might be holding and making sure that, that's getting out to residents through our channels, but also making sure that we've had we have a lot of construction going on in the town center right now. And so making sure that we are updating our Chamber of Commerce and therefore trying to update our businesses on some of those challenging things that are going on. I think there's a couple things that I think we do well. I think we do well at notifying residents about finite projects or finite initiatives that we have. Like if we have a traffic calming project, we hold a public hearing and we notify an area around a project. I think we need to work better on the big picture stuff. I think we need to work better to get out some of those longer term visions and strategies that we have for the community and what those steps are to get there. A lot of our projects, as I said, take years. And so we get a request from a resident in 2019 and it takes till 2020 for us to get the funding for that project at town meeting. And what happened in the interim, how are we communicating that to residents and what the status is. So I think that's one of the things that we have to work on. And I think we also have to work on growing our list of, growing people's knowledge of the resources that we have, town manager's newsletter, the website. We also just are working to put together with Civic Plus. We just purchased their Civic Send software, which is like a new newsletter program that's built in to the Civic Plus software who runs our website. So that's something that we'll be working with on an initiative over the coming months to really try to roll that out. But we need to be more proactive in getting information out to the community through all channels. And so I think that's really a strategy and an approach that we need to take over the coming year. Internal, as I mentioned, we have monthly department head meetings. We have a lot of correspondence that comes out through our HR department about various HR initiatives. I, as town manager, meet with staff regularly on a variety of topics and just making sure that we're constantly in communication internally about projects and priorities and issues. And that's really key, is it's not just a once a month thing. We're all sitting around the table. It's a constant communication between all levels of staff and bringing people together when there's multiple departments involved in an issue, bringing those people together at the table and having a conversation.
How do you work to resolve conflicts and disputes, and can you briefly include an example during your 1 year in Winchester of a time when you had to deal with, if one existed, where you had to deal with a polarizing issue, and how did you address it and or resolve it or not resolve it?
Sure. So I think and I talked a little bit previously about kind of the staff kind of level dispute mitigation. I think one of the kind of project level things that kind of was already in play when I came on as acting town manager is the Waterfield lot development project. We had a project that the town had moved forward for a redevelopment of that site for affordable housing. There was a referendum, and then subsequent to that, the board created a task force of kind of folks with opposing opinions, right, to come together and have a conversation about that project. And so I, as town manager, was part of that effort to bring forward the recommendations of that task force to the board. And I think, one of the things that we were able to do successfully was to find some points of commonality and consensus between a group with divergent positions, frankly. And they, even though maybe they didn't agree on kind of the big picture stuff, we were able to find some items where we were able to get all members of that group to agree. And we were able to take those items and build on it and ultimately successfully renegotiate a deal and bring that forward to town meeting and have it be successful at town meeting. So I think that's an example, and I think that's the kind of dialogue that we as a community need to support, that open communication and dialogue on and hearing various opinions and differing opinions and having those tough conversations. That's how government works. Is we don't always agree, and we have to figure out how we can meet in the middle and have conversations to move us forward.
Beth, along those lines, in this town, there appears to be a silent majority of people that just don't get involved unless something's being built in their backyard, and then we hear from them. And there's a vocal minority that are very involved.
Yeah.
How do you balance that? How do you balance, understanding what that silent majority, what's best for the community and what's best, as a whole? It's
hard, right? Because you do surveys and you get 800 responses and you think that's great, but you've missed the, 20,000 other people that live in town, right? And so that's hard. And it's about, a lot of it is doing the legwork and having meetings and engaging the community, and it's hard work, and and it's reaching out as many times over and over again and finding ways to continue to engage. And a lot of times, unfortunately, you don't hear that feedback until right before the shovel goes in the ground or right before the building next door is about to start or whatever. But it's important to continue to have those conversations. I've been thinking a lot about, since the communication study report came out, how we in the town manager's office can do better to reach out to residents. And a couple of things I've thought about is in our quarterly water bills, we could have a kind of a newsletter. Like we have a weekly newsletter that reaches, quite frankly, a small audience. And so we need to figure out ways that we can improve the reach of that on a weekly basis. But can we do things in mailings we're already doing, right? Can we do a quarterly town manager's newsletter that goes out to the entire community and that highlights some of those key projects and initiatives that are going on and lets people know where they can find more information and who they can talk to if they want to know more or have a concern. So it's a challenge for sure, and it's something I think we as a town as a whole needs to work on to figure out continually. And there's no one solution, right? It's project based, it's issue based all along the way.
Beth, how do you define a successful relationship? Excuse me. How do you define a successful relationship between a town manager and a select board? And how would you, as the town manager, contribute to achieving such a relationship?
Yeah, so I think it's the most important relationship, right? I serve or should I be hired in this role? I serve at the pleasure of the board, and it's important that we have an open and trusting relationship. It's important that the board feels I'm getting the policy direction from the board, and it's important that the board as a whole is having those conversations, and that I am communicating issues and concerns to the board as a whole. Since I've come on as acting town manager, I've had a standing weekly meeting with the chair of the board. Rich and I have a meeting every Tuesday to go over not just agendas, but the issues that we see coming up, and to figure out how we bring those forward to the board on an agenda. Other issues I will distribute via email to the board, just to make sure there's transparency and communication about things that have come into the town that I want to make sure everybody's aware of. But ultimately, it's my job, I feel, to present the board options on things, priorities that the board has, policy decisions they want to make. I'm here to present options. I'm here, if requested, to provide a staff recommendation or to provide my recommendation, but ultimately it's the board who makes the decision, and I am tasked with implementing whatever that decision is, and that's my role as town manager, and to bring that forward to staff and to figure out how we can make that work.
Okay. Board members, I'll turn it over, see if you have questions.
Any questions?
Beth, in terms of, you're talking about like providing recommendations on projects or keeping us informed. If there are, major projects or initiatives, what's your approach to dealing with change management, both sort of internally within the town office as well as potentially like externally?
Change is hard. I think, we have a few initiatives where, we're looking at some changes at the transfer station, for example, where, that's very much everybody's used to doing things one way, right? They go into transfer station to do it this way, and they come out, and that's, so as we're looking at changing behavior, right, we have to have those conversations about, how we communicate this, how we communicate that change, how we receive feedback on changes. Can we pivot if we think something's going to go one way, and we feel like, we rolled it out this way, and really, we need to make some changes based on the feedback we heard, and making sure that we're flexible. I think that's important in town government. Is we're making sure that we're adaptable. Really, that's key. And change will happen. And I think big picture, we as a town, and I know the planning board is working on some initiatives around rezoning, right, and changing the way some of our neighborhoods look. As I was preparing for the meeting, I was rereading sections of the master plan where, one of the big things was balancing development with preservation. So that's a constant conflict and change in Winchester, right? Several years ago, the town meeting approved the changes to the CBD zoning downtown to grow our residential presence in the town center, grow the number of residential units, which I think has a lot of benefit long-term for our community. Some of the things the planning board is looking at now is looking at ways that we can grow the non-residential component of our tax base, both on North Main Street and then the Holden Cross Street neighborhood. So that's kind of two of the studies that we have going on right now. And it all starts with everything else, with that communication at the base level and hearing feedback from our residents and the community at large.
Other questions?
So coming into this position from being, the engineer, two questions. First is, what has surprised you, coming into this position? Everybody always, looks at these positions and think they can easily do this,
I didn't think that, for the record.
So others have. So what's been a surprise to you coming into serving as the acting manager that you didn't expect?
I've worked here for a long time, so there's not a lot of surprises in terms of how town government works. I feel like I've understood that very well. I think I've been pleasantly surprised by the amount of outreach I've gotten from the community in terms of wanting to let me know about initiatives that are happening and wanting to have conversations with me as town manager, and it gives you a different perspective, I think, on some of those areas where I wasn't as involved as, town engineer. And really, it just shows the opportunity that we in town government have to partner with those community groups or other organizations in town to really better our community. And so I think it's been a pleasant surprise from that respect.
So what about the level of communications? It's different when you get into the position.
It is.
Is the level of communication been what you expected, or is it different?
Like the email count I get every day.
All the people who are pushing, I always said, I was a manager for 35 years. I always said my job was to say no more than to say yes.
Yeah, and I think my job is to hear what people have to say. A lot of it, right, is listening and figuring out how that plays into the big picture of our community. And some of it is funding, right? And I've heard a lot over the years as town engineer about transportation, right? And about the desire for our community to improve our pedestrian and traffic safety. I've heard that's probably, as town engineer, the number one thing that I hear feedback on from our community. Right. And so it takes on a different perspective when you're in the leadership role, trying to figure out how to make that happen, right? And I think that's part of the conversation is getting that feedback and figuring out the things that we can do and the things that we can't do. And certainly the financial limitations are real, but there are partnership things available to us in terms of collaborating at a community level on other things. So.
And the other part of that question is, what's going to keep you up at night?
Right now, I'd say it's our AAA bond rating with Moody's. I think it's the financial plan for the next few years is we have some work to do over the next several months to figure out how we're going to move forward. But I'm excited to have the conversation.
Great. Mr. Chair, anybody else? Would you like to follow up?
Go ahead, Dan.
Is there something that you might change in your approach if you're the appointed town manager that might be different from what you've been doing in the past year, or something that you would immerse yourself in more, or something you'd be eager to take on?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, I really have kind of been wearing two hats over the past year. I haven't been fully in the engineering department, but I also have not been fully out of the engineering department. So, I think dedicating my time fully to the management role is important, and increasing those collaborations and communications and meetings in a more general sense to hear about issues, and taking a more leadership role in kind of bringing those issues and concerns forward to the board for consideration, and to other boards and committees and to staff members. I think one of the things that we as a town have kind of have underfunded is our technology, and so that is an area where I think we need to do some work. And I think that part of my job as town manager will be to really put some time into that. And it does go hand in hand with the communication, and it also goes hand in hand with how we roll out, more online payments and that type of thing. The services that our residents expect that we haven't been able to fully provide because of some of the limitations we've had in those areas. So I think that's one of kind of my priorities should I get the main job, the final job as town manager. But the view certainly looks different, from an acting role to a permanent town manager. So, yeah.
Others? Okay.
So with that, an opportunity for
Sure.
a closing statement
Yeah.
from you to the board.
So I first want to thank you all for this opportunity, this conversation. I think it was very pleasant for me to as you said, I've been sitting on that side of the table for the past year. It's good to be back on this side of the table, having a more conversational approach here with the board. I've been very blessed to work for this community for the past 18 years. I've been challenged professionally, and I've very much enjoyed all of the work. I'm very proud of the work that I've been able to accomplish working for the town, between the MBTA station renovation, the Tri-Community Bikeway, some of the transportation improvements that we've done, and some of the less, exciting projects, but the dam work that we're working on right now. and I'm excited to kind of take that to the next level, and working with the bigger picture visioning for the town, and taking the lead on working with the board in developing those goals and initiatives, and figuring out how we can fund them and figuring out what we can fund. As I said, I'm a resident of this town. I think it gives me a different perspective than somebody coming in from the outside. I know the town. I've been to the soccer fields. I've been to the playgrounds. And so I think, I'm excited to be able to use my knowledge of the town and my relationships that I've been able to, have over the past 18 years to really move this position to the next level. So appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you, Beth. Thanks for
Thank
coming
you.
in and sitting with us for
You're welcome.
this hour.
This
Great.
is great, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you putting yourself out, for the community coming out here, and also sitting in this seat for
you go.
last year. I'm sure everybody's appreciative of the leadership you have shown in that part of it.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, and as you know, the board will be talking
Yeah.
Monday night,
Thank you.
so.
Yes. Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Take care now.
All right.
Have a good night.
Thanks.
All right, so we have just a couple of housekeeping things. You guys are, well, you can stick around for a second.
Yeah, a couple
Don't go anywhere.
comments, yeah.
All right, so we talked before about, conducting these interviews, and then kind of circling back and seeing, what the next steps in the process are. We have a meeting scheduled for the 12th at 7:30 to, theoretically deliberate and make a decision. Is everyone comfortable with keeping that schedule at this point, and coming back on Monday, certainly having public comment that night, and then also getting into some discussions about, a candidate? Are there any steps in between that anyone feels this board needs to take in the process before we do that?
One thing I would say too is make it clear that residents can write in to us as well if they can't make the meeting on Monday. Sometimes it's a lot for people just to come in for like a quick public comment.
Yeah, no.
Even though they want to share their feelings.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, written comment is just as good. I mean, I read them all that come in. All our email addresses are on the town website, so if you can't make it at 7:30, because we'll start right with public comment that night, then I implore you to submit a written statement via email. Today's Wednesday, so, plenty of time to do that if we're meeting again on Monday. So plenty of time for all of you to digest all the information you heard today. This video will be available on WinCam probably within the next 24 hours, would be my guess. Certainly you can watch it again, or those who've missed part of it tonight, can certainly watch it as well. So anything else?
If I may,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, public comment is, an unusual situation, that's your choice to have, but I'm going to ask that everybody make sure they watch the comments and stick to the positive. We have 3 people who've put themselves out in a public view, 2 of them 3 of them, all 3, and, if they're not getting the position, have to go back to their other positions. Right. So we ask people to stay on the positive during the discussions, and, taking public comments by written comment is generally taken, but I would just be careful with, the public view. I just want to, protect the 3 people who have, put themselves out and, not turn into a situation of, pointing out issues. And if you have questions, that's what we're here for behind the scenes. So, we're available to, between now and then, if you want to, place a phone call to us, we can help you talk through any question you may have, as individual members of the board, so.
No, that's a good point. I'd be mindful of that if I was coming to give a public comment, but certainly, we have a long-standing history in this town of allowing the public to give input, and certainly, we're not going to, in this important decision, not going to deprive the public of that right. So, written comment is certainly just as welcome, especially if you have, maybe some negative thoughts. But we'd like you to keep it positive, especially if you're coming, to come that night and give, comment that's, recorded here. So, any other thoughts?
I just want to thank Community Paradigm for facilitating this. Really a great job helping us focus and come up with a short list. So it was great. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'll echo that. You guys have been great partners during this whole process. It's been a pleasure to work with all of you as we, kind of round the corner into the final steps here. I want to thank all 3 candidates for, dedicating some time this evening to spend with us. it was great to, meet in person, hear from them. I know, it's been a long process for them, to the submission process, the screening committee, and now us. So thank you to everybody for coming. Thank you for everyone who watched at home. Thank you to WinCam, obviously. It's unusual for them to have to broadcast on a Wednesday night for us, especially a lengthy meeting like this. So thank you to WinCam. Thank you to all of you for participating in the process as well. So with that, I would, entertain a motion to adjourn for the evening, and then to reconvene Monday night.
A motion to adjourn.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Thanks, WinCam.
Thank you.